hives don't show till they start scratching.
Yeah, well, I think it's,
Skin itches first and then,
they sent
The
me
hives
this
break out.
picture earlier today on his wrist. And then later they're like, well, then there wasn't anything, and then later in the day, he's scratching. So, anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know what else wants to.
Of course that makes you concerned as a parent.
Right.
Of course. I know exactly what happens.
I'm like,
Some adrenaline kicks in, your level goes from here to here.
but then if you call the pediatrician and make an appointment, by the time they get to the appointment, there's nothing there.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna go ahead and,
okay.
ready.
Anyway,
so seeing that it's 7:10, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. I'd like to recognize that Chelmsford Telemedia is recording and broadcasting this meeting live tonight. So if there's anybody else that's recording, please let me know. Seeing none, we'll open our meeting tonight, like we open all of our meetings, with public input. Is there anyone that has any input for the committee at this time? Seeing none. The next item on our agenda is to discuss the RFP bid award review and then ultimately take a vote and determine our next steps with this. So I'll move on to this. To bring everybody up to speed, both here and in the public, the process that we're going through is a little different than what we had proposed at our last meeting. So the town revised the committee's RFP bid award review process on 12/21 and then 12/22. We received two separate emails about that. The decisions were made that the bid proposals will not be shared publicly. So you'll notice on the original agenda for this meeting that there was a placeholder link for the received bid awards to be put on there, but we didn't actually fill those out. So that's still just a placeholder. So the bids weren't actually made public. According to the procurement statutes, it can only be made public. They can only be made public after the final bid is awarded. So that was the reason for that change. All five of the committee members, there's four of us here tonight. Marcus Bush isn't with us. I don't know if he's coming or not, but all five of us were sent copies of 7 proposals that were presented to the town on a CD that we reviewed over the Christmas break, over the holidays. The town manager, I checked with the town manager. I'm sorry?
Over the weekend.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh no, some of
I
us
tried
did
to-
it yesterday.
I did email the town manager and he indicated to me that the bid proposals can be discussed in our public meeting tonight and in open session.
are there any restrictions on how we?
He did not give me any. He said just,
You know, we maybe needed to like company A versus company B or. No?
there weren't any restrictions put on it. And then I asked him specifically about the revising the agenda, because if we had to revise the agenda to take that item off, we were at the point where on 12/22, we were past the 48-hour rule, so we would have had to reschedule the meeting, and he said specifically to simply leave the link as it is and move forward with the meeting. So it's my understanding that we're not under any sort of constraints as to what we can or can't say. We just can't publish the
Visually
documents,
show the
share those.
documents. I assume we can have them up here there's a camera behind
I think
us.
we're probably okay. We could ask the telemedia not to film any of our laptops if that's possible.
Yeah, okay, maybe nothing
And,
from.
you know, just from my personal standpoint, I'm not going to necessarily sort of point out the negatives in very specific details.
Yes, yes,
How you guys choose to do your
Try to be-
evaluations is up to you.
diplomatic.
The next step would be that we'll discuss these things, and then we will need to take a vote as a group and say what our recommendations are. Then we'll need to select 2 members of this group to sit with 3 members of the DPW, Gary Persichetti, Steve Yonley, and Nick Parlee, to attempt to come up with one recommendation to provide to the town manager. That meeting is not going to be subject to posting requirements or any other regulations under the open meeting law that's per the town manager. So that's going to be scheduled by the DPW, and there won't be any public in attendance. If we find at that meeting that there's a lack of consensus, the town manager has asked me to let him know, and he will make a determination on how to proceed to resolve the matter. Any questions? Any questions from public? So we received, or the DPW received 7 bid proposals. The bid period closed on the 21st of December at 10 a.m. And all of these, except for one, were all affiliated with playground equipment manufacturers. As I mentioned, that we'll need to discuss and make one recommendation, and then discuss, and then take a vote on that. If we aren't able to come up with one recommendation, I would suggest that we discuss either doing a majority recommendation and then a minority recommendation, or somehow come up with a tiered recommendation that the two members can take to the DPW and work with them to come up with one. Do you guys agree with
That
that?
seems like a good
Absolutely.
idea. And even if we come up with one, we might want to have some tiered theories in case we run into strong differing opinions
Okay.
in the other committee.
Have a backup.
So that we have backup information about what the other members of the board felt
Okay,
about other things. That's
So my disc did not include Utiplay, the Play World.
Ultiplay?
Multiplay, okay.
Multiply?
that's a big deal.
That's
Oh.
huge.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised.
That is a
So
big
you
deal.
only had 6?
Yeah.
Huh.
I was wondering why, everyone's saying 7, and I didn't see that last one.
That's unfortunate.
That's kind of a deal killer, frankly.
That interesting, huh?
I think,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you will feel like you can review it while we are going over this. I have it, you can visually look at it while we are going over this, but I do think that I have significant enough interest in discussing that one.
I do too.
Yeah, it's not one that I would throw out
No,
or
me
say, I
neither.
feel no need to talk about it.
I'll
I
take a
do-
look at it as
So, I
it's
don't
being
know
discussed,
We
and
can do some, here, I'll bring it up for you now, and then as we talk about things, maybe you can peruse it.
Right.
So this is the ultimate.
And I
And-
mentioned earlier, we need to select the two committee members to represent the committee.
Mhm.
I think, given that we may end up with a tiered recommendation, it's gonna be incumbent on us to take good notes for what everybody's feelings are on each individual vendor, right? Because we don't know yet who's gonna represent, so. And then, like I said, if there's a lack of consensus, even amongst ourselves tonight, I'll let the town manager know where we stand on that, and then he can decide how he wants to move forward. I'll definitely let him know about this not being included, and if it affects your recommendation, then, we'll have to discuss possibly,
That's funny.
that's
postponing
okay.
the discussion.
Do we, so how do we, sorry, how do we want to proceed with choosing who's going to go? And at what point do we want to do that? Because it sounds like from what you just said that you want to wait until we've gone through it.
That was my initial thinking, but I mean, if you guys wanna do it ahead of time, we can do that too. It's up to you guys.
I'll go either way. I know you had expressed interest, so
I'm very interested in if there isn't any,
that's one.
if anyone doesn't want me to, that's,
I'd,
Fine, but-
I'd be interested, but I don't have the availability the
Okay.
next few weeks.
I'm open to it, but I'm not committed. I mean,
I know.
I'm open to it, but it's not something that
it's not a
has to happen.
requirement for you.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I trust you guys, so.
Okay. I mean, I can go either way on it. I can go, I cannot go. I don't want to step on toes either.
It's unfortunate Marcus isn't here, but I don't know if the fact that he's not here, it would be hard for him if he's not,
Yeah, I think
if he
the
doesn't show
person
up.
should be at this meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
how about we know you're one and we'll figure out the second before we close.
Okay.
Okay?
Good.
Okay.
So how would you guys like to proceed? Would you like to, just kind of, go through your list of thoughts? How you graded these individual vendors out? Go through your top list, or how do you wanna proceed?
I know this might sound counterproductive. Can we start with the bottom? Because if there's ones that we feel like are just not worth discussing, let's
That's
not waste our
probably
time.
it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I support that.
And
So
this is
she
gonna
made the
sound
suggestion?
crazy, I know. I suggest we throw out Little Tykes.
Yes.
Well, okay, so let's talk about what, about your,
Sure, yeah.
review of Little Tykes then.
Okay.
You first or me first?
Go ahead, my dear.
Is there a, I'm sorry, just a quick question. Is there a way to get on the internet?
TOC guest.
Do I need a password?
No, if you click onto it and then it'll give you one of those pop-up screens where you have to choose say yes, I agree that.
Okay, but I don't need anything further than that.
The Little Tykes had some really nice individual equipment that was interactive, but as a whole, their structures were not. And
Not,
did not promote interactive play. There were set sizes. The ramps were always going to be a particular size. They couldn't be made wider. And the things that they have for the bottom walls that we wanted for the sensory play are pieces of things that people might have in their homes, like the front door of the Little Tykes Playhouse, or.
Yes.
And so I thought it just would not appeal to anyone over the age of maybe 9.
I completely second all those things. It felt, although I liked some of the individual components, it didn't, I know this is a hard thing too, it didn't have the right feel to me, and it felt like I could have that experience in somebody's backyard without going to a playground. And I felt like this is a playground to go to. It should have things that I don't have in my yard, and yes, it should be more accessible, and I got the feeling from that there would be not much wiggle room, like here's what it is, take it or leave it.
This is a stupid question,
So-
but I kept on trying to process how people were supposed to climb up the tower. I know it's supposed to be accessible, but I actually
Yeah.
kept going,
I didn't
don't-
feel like it was very
I don't
accessible.
feel like it would be easy for me to do it,
It
to
is
follow my
not
kid.
accessible.
Yeah, I didn't think it was.
It has one small ramp here, so this lower level is
Right, well, I think the theory is that if you have arm strength, so I mean, I assume the theory is that there's slides, and this is on ramps and stuff, but I think according to their website, I think, and I could be wrong, I think their theory is this is accessible because it does not require purely standing walking mobility. I could be wrong, but honestly, I kept looking at it going, as a child, I could probably go on it, but I won't be able to really easily follow my child up there at this point.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go to that playground.
okay.
I
mean,
mean, I would have more fun in our backyard on our climbing structure that we have. So,
In reviewing it, it was interesting, I didn't see, the word inclusive wasn't listed
exactly.
anywhere in it. I didn't see anything about a community build, but that's not surprising because I honestly didn't see anything about community builds in all of them except for one.
Yeah. I saw it in
I will
two,
say
though.
that I don't know if with the rest of you, I did a lot of, because I only had limited access to the optical drive on the computer, I did a lot of research on the websites of the people involved, because regardless
Okay.
of what the bids are that we got, assumedly we have some variability with what they offer. And I will say that they did partner with Unlimited Play, which is an organization that builds universally accessible playgrounds. So it's a new partnership they have. There's some stuff about it that I liked. There's some variations on it that I liked. They did include the landform, which some people didn't
not.
include. They claim good. There's some stuff on their website about how they're very realistic nature things. I like some of the layout that they did. There were some weirdnesses about it.
I mean, I don't hate it. The thing is, I just felt there were better things. To me, that would be my last choice, and so I
Yeah.
don't feel like I should even spend 2 more minutes talking about it. There's just better ones.
In looking at the recommendation criteria that were in the RFP, the overall, they called it conformance to the proposal. I took that as being the general performance of the thing. I gave them a 3 on that, because I didn't see anything in there about the community build. And then also, it seemed like the management team that would be in charge of it had roughly 3 years of experience working with playgrounds, and they'd been very busy over the last 3 years working on playgrounds, but that was about the extent of it. So that experience kind of scared me off a bit, and that was one of the scores that I adjusted. And then also the references that they provided didn't have any cost associated with it, so it was difficult to judge what
Level of play.
level of builds that they were working with those. I didn't feel like there was enough information for the working on similar projects. I did see that they've been busy over the last 3 years, but I couldn't really gauge how that compared to what the project that we want to work on.
Yep.
And that was pretty much where I left that. The other things that kind of threw me were that they had suggested a February kickoff meeting, which is about a month late for
Yes,
our needs.
Yeah.
Um,
Although they seem to theorize June as the end date still.
they
right?
did.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it was just one of those, we were trying to push it, we're trying to push it.
Right.
So it was one of those things that sort of led me to have them. They were, in my rankings, they were second to last.
Okay. So we can agree that that would not be who we recommend. Let's go to the next company.
I would say Childscapes,
yeah, Childscapes, I have to say, also was out for me.
Okay.
mainly because while they stressed accessibility, it wasn't universal design, and it wasn't inclusive. So they had definite spots here and there to essentially service disabled children, but it wasn't integrated in. There was no way for kids to play with their friends or their parents in the space, and I thought that had been one of our main goals.
Yeah, again, this was one of the ones that didn't have the word inclusive in the RFP, to your point.
Yep.
Yeah, they have ramps, but that's,
Right.
and then it seemed like most of this was over wood chips. Like, and I could be wrong, but I thought that a lot of it was over wood chips, which, like, the majority of these. And honestly, I don't know, I couldn't figure out what these were.
Those are spinners of some sort.
Yeah, well, I figured that, but I never figured out what sort, I guess. So,
In looking through the references that they provided, it seemed like, there were a couple that were of the scope that we're looking at, but the majority seemed to be smaller projects. And there seemed to be, I guess there's one smaller one in 2017, then the rest were pretty much in 2010, 11, 12, and 13. So there was
Right.
kind of a big gap between,
I was
so.
wondering what happened over the last 4 years, because I saw nothing.
And like with all of these, there's sort of gaps in some of the stuff that I'd love to be able to have the opportunity to,
Conversation.
but we clarified with the
Right.
DPW that we can't have any follow-up conversations with them to clarify anything. So we kind of have to go with what we have in front of us. And to me, that, those references were, and those projects were kind of scattered, smaller, and older than the ones that I was looking for.
They did have one large project called Josh's Jungle from Connecticut. And I kept wishing that they'd provide something as imaginative and as dense as that
Right.
was, as
Right.
opposed to the very sparse few things they were showing us for our bid.
I think that one was done in 2013, if I'm not mistaken.
I
So.
think so.
In looking at the recommendation criteria from the RFP, my scores, I didn't give any 4s on this. Mine were mostly 3s and 2s. And that was, again, tied to the references. I also saw that they seem to be they seem to stress that they are experienced in the construction industry. I got a lot of construction experience.
Yes.
Yes,
But
which
I
doesn't
didn't-
help us with the community build.
Right.
Also, one of our things was, and I think some of the other designs have this as well, so this is, I thought in the RFP it specified that we wanted to avoid having the giant play structure right against the western side, which is
Yes.
exactly,
What they
What they
did.
did.
Yep, I
Yeah.
ranked them badly.
like, everything's on the
Little
left-hand
big
side.
structure.
Which is kind of the way it is today, in all fairness.
Right.
So,
But we're looking to
but
improve.
we did specify that we wanted it, and it's literally all lined up over on that, so.
I think they were leaving room for the natural playscape area to be over here,
Okay, which might,
which several of them have done.
yeah.
Well, they had the hill, but it was in the
Oh, yeah, no, they had
in
the hill on the front,
back,
which I
in the
also
front,
thought was
which I thought was weird.
weird.
It obstructs the view.
right. the hill that they
Yes.
suggested was not where I would have put a hill, but
Yeah.
maybe they have a good reason for it, but again, we can't ask them.
Right.
But yeah, like she said, it obstructs, it would be how you enter the park, you would be on the raised
Mm-hmm.
area or something, but
Mhm.
although we don't know where the gap in the fence would be, so I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It was confusing, but I think, I could keep talking about this, but I think we're all in agreement that this isn't gonna be our top 3,
Not-
so maybe
not-
we should
Not in
move
the
on.
top 3 for me,
No.
not in the top 3 for anybody.
No.
All right, so we have Little Tykes and Childscapes out. I'd like to say that Compton, there were lots of things that I liked about it, but it doesn't have community build at all.
Nope.
Or anything about community build or fundraising or anything on their website. I was really disappointed because there was a lot of really good things about their materials. Like, they're
The
really,
recycle.
well, not just recycle, but they were very conscientious, and I think, and I should know this, but I think they're a European company, which allows them to, or requires them to follow through with a lot of the concerns about, I think they were one of the ones who was getting rid of phthalates, or they have polyethylene as opposed to PVC, and there was a lot of good stuff, but I found limited stuff. They have a very different perspective on how to do inclusive, which is cool. I didn't find it aesthetically pleasing, but I maybe as a child would have liked to play on it, but I just kept getting back to they seem like they have no community build possibility, and I'm not sure about all of the fixtures for, I know they have warranties and stuff, but there's a lot of wiring involved. I don't know.
Wiring.
Well, it has like all of the,
I'm trying to remember in my mind. I'm
it's the
pulling
one,
it up.
it's mostly
The climbing netting
strings,
type
it's
thing?
all
Yeah.
netting.
Yeah.
And there's benefits. So, I looked at their website a lot to find out information about how they did inclusive
I've
stuff.
been to playgrounds with their equipment. They're
Right.
all over.
So
Yeah.
I think there's some interesting stuff with that, and they do a lot of inclusive things, but they both don't have nature theme at all, and they don't have community build, and they don't have an aesthetic that to me speaks to the location, but that's a kind of a.
I knocked them down for their community build for sure. I shouldn't say knocked them
I
down,
really
docked
rather
them
liked
points, if you will.
Their stuff.
Some of their stuff I like.
Some of it
Like,
was really cool.
I really like that they have accessible stuff for younger kids. Like they have
Yes.
they have things that I haven't seen anywhere else for the younger playground that's much more engaging.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really excited about that. But
But the older playground component was
I
like,
just the rest of it, like there's some stuff in it that's really cool.
mhm.
I just didn't. I don't know. I like a lot of the stuff that they have in the younger kids playground. I kept going back and forth of kind of like their main structure in the little area is kind of cool and kind of weird, but I think as a kid, I'm trying to picture it as a kid. And there's lots of things to do on it if you don't see it in a linear fashion, which is actually great for creative play. And I do keep thinking about the group of mothers that I get together with who we wanted to go to a playground with our little babies. And there really isn't much you can do other than play in a sandbox with most little kids. There is stuff you could do in this sort of area. But I kept coming back to, they're the only company of the ones that are left that don't have any nature themes specifically stuff, and they have no community build things. And those were kind of things that we'd talked about hugely. So I don't know. There are interesting things about it. It's just, those
Not
were
in
kind
your
of,
top 3.
well, it was just kind of, that kind of knocked them down for me. So that's, I don't know what other people, if other people had them on a top 3.
I like their inclusive designs. It seemed like that they were, and I felt like that the equipment sort of matched at least our stated vision of having a more open playground area, right? So, because it's, I mean, the way I characterize them is that they're kind of like the Dr. Seuss look of
Yeah.
That's a
playground
good
structures,
characterization.
right?
I like that.
Lots of lines and sort of forms and stuff. It was a little modern.
Well, I guess that's what I kept getting back to, is it feels modern for the location, and that's fine. It's not my aesthetic, so I'm trying to get over the fact that it's not my aesthetic, because it is other people's aesthetic, and I don't want to, there's a lot of good things about the design, and I'm trying not to get caught up on how it looks, because it's not what I picture when I think nature themed at all. It doesn't bring me into nature unless it's a giant arachnid. I
I
mean,
felt like it had natural colors, but
Yes.
beyond that, I
Right.
was just having a
Exactly.
hard time.
It
Oh,
sort
you
of has
see,
a
now
natural,
I see that as like the tree house where you're climbing up a rope
yeah.
to get to
it's
it.
kind of forms are natural. In looking at the recommendation criteria, I actually gave them almost all fours across the board, with the exception of the general performance, and that was mainly because there wasn't a community build component in there, and it also seemed to be, I don't know if this is true or not, but it just seemed to be a little more restrictive on choices. It didn't seem like there was a ton of equipment to necessarily sort of customize and put into certain
Right.
certain places. I don't know if that's true or not. That's one of the things that I probably would have clarified with them.
I did like that they broke out in detail all of the accessible stuff.
Yeah,
Like, they have very clear information about a lot of the things.
The one thing that I was really kind of troubled about was that in the design itself, they, I think almost all of the other draft designs included at least one poured in place surface, and this one seemed to me, from what I could tell, to all be wood fiber.
well, I thought the paths might have
Oh.
been poured in place, but maybe I'm
I couldn't tell.
wrong.
I went over it a couple
Oh, so
times,
now I'm really
Yeah.
confused.
and it just
Oh,
all looked
wow.
like wood fibers to me.
I
Like,
think you're
Could be,
right.
yeah.
Which kind of
defeats the whole purpose of,
inclusive purpose.
yeah, and
How did I miss?
inclusive and universal design were really upfront in a lot of the stuff that they were talking about. So it was a little bit of a disconnect for me on that. I was really pleased with their references. They have done a ton of work, all in our price range, all within, Somerville, Everett, Connecticut, Falmouth, and the vineyards. I mean, they've done a lot of work, and they're a very well-respected company. And I think because of that performance, personally, they were in my top three, but they weren't my number one choice.
Yeah. I actually rated them very high, because if I went through and said with the RFP, even if I didn't like how it looked or it didn't give me the right feeling, like, they did deliver, minus exactly these points that you guys brought up. So I
And then-
felt the same way. Although it doesn't have the right feels to me, they delivered what we asked them to deliver for the most part. Like you
Right.
said, they're in my top three on score too.
One other thing that I wanted to point out too was that
As I said,
Here,
old
look, there's
computer
two-
had an optical
Look,
drive.
there's two doodads.
Thank you.
they also referenced that
Oh, that's not gonna work. I need a grounding.
they had a landscape architect in-house.
Yes, I
which
thought that was
I-
also.
That's a big plus, or
Was
would
a
be a
plus.
big plus.
You
So
need,
We'll see how long.
if it doesn't, I can swing to this chair so you can kind of slide down.
I also like their,
Not quite.
they were one of a few that did sort of a park and park design where the structures were sort of satellited out, and I think if I remember correctly, they had located the louder structures away from the abutting properties.
Yes, they made an effort.
But they had sort of pathways through the playground it so it wasn't necessarily concentrated like the one is now, which I thought was kind of a neat concept, kind of a park and park design.
It is, but when you look at it in real life, and Burlington's playground is like that.
Oh, wait, you were able to.
There's a lot of walkway and a lot of space around each plaything. But unlike other playgrounds, I don't see kids using those spaces.
With the paths or the play spaces? Like the equipment spaces?
The wider playing spaces. They're either right on the equipment or they're on the benches. And it is also really hot,
Yeah, because of the lack of shade.
yeah.
And I think this one did include shade in the shade structures in the thing as well, so
You might be having a problem with that.
I agree with what you're saying, that it doesn't, that needs to be addressed. Right?
I did like the way they separated the toddler from the older kids' play area by literally being on opposite ends, with the swings for each age in the middle, because that allowed the little kids their runaround space.
I did like that.
See, I have really mixed thoughts about that, only because my boys being at really different ages, when they're too far away,
Right.
then it becomes a problem.
I did like though that they had the
So-
swings in the middle. That
I
I,
like the
thought was a
swings in the
good
middle. Buffer
way
zone.
to kind of, and I think it, is this the one that had the ability where you could swing multiple ages in the same?
I believe, yes, it did. So there was the circle swing,
Yeah.
and then there was the, I mean, I don't know, we call it the chair swing. That's just what my boys call it. And so then
Yeah.
it gets stuck in my brain. The
The
chair
bucket
swing
swing.
with the big kid swings, but then the bucket swings for the toddlers were closer to the toddler area. I have it up here if this helps at all.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't, like I said, I don't think it was bad. I think, you know, if I went through on paper and said, what did the RFP ask of them? What did they deliver? They were really on point. It doesn't mean that I love it and it has all the feels, but
I'm really surprised though, from everything I'm looking at, all the specific details, it looks like engineered wood fiber, which doesn't
yeah, that doesn't go
Give
with the,
anything,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm missing something, but they look like engineered wood fiber in the specifics, which seems really weird because I'm pretty sure they have a whole bunch of stuff about their ability to do surfaces.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I would have clarified,
Yep.
because that really threw me off as well.
Okay, so this was in your top three, Bill, and in my top three, so I'm just gonna make a note of that as we go through these, if we need to come back and revisit this one.
Okay.
Does that sound fair?
Did you guys have a feeling on where you would rank this?
It wasn't in my top three.
It was in mine, but I was working out of 6 instead of 7, so
Right.
it may move out of the top 3 once
Sure.
I see the other one.
Who else was on, have we hit who was on your bottom, Bill?
Play by design, and for full disclosure, I wanna say that the Michael Cohen, who I believe is one of the principals of Play by Design, reached out to me back when we were crafting the presentation for the fall town meeting. So he actually ended up giving me a ton of information about the community build process, the design process. So a lot of the stuff that you may see in this presentation might sort of, the vernacular might be the same as what you've seen presented, and that's why. I haven't spoken to him since well before the RFP was issued. But I just want to make everybody aware that he had, and he had actually shared a lot of the files and stuff that I shared with everyone, like the gift brick files and all those things actually came from them, so.
But why are they towards the bottom for you?
Well,
There's no actual
they
design.
feel great, but they didn't give us any mock-up. They didn't provide anything essentially like that the town asked for, you know, specific
Right.
documents, like there's nothing.
I'm a little baffled. Like, I was so baffled that I went back and asked people in the town who gave us a disc whether we were possibly missing a file because they have so many of the feels
Exactly.
for exactly
they,
what
they
I wanted.
are all the feels, but
I
unfortunately
couldn't-
there's nothing to
There's
substantiate
no design.
that.
I have
and
no
so-
idea what we would get
But
other
that
than
made sense to me, since they are focused on the public input design.
And I tried to see it from that point, but in terms of matching RFP requirements,
You can't submit that to a
You
town
can't.
and expect them to
That's-
choose you
that's
without
what
providing
I don't understand
anything
is
else.
I feel like I know that we have whatever the town got, but I feel like they forgot to send the town a file because I feel like they obviously have done amazing, great things, which means they have worked with towns before, and I would assume that they would know business-wise that they have to send in certain documents, and there aren't
They just
the
didn't.
expected documents, which is, it's killing me, because I like what they can do, it seems.
Their
I
breadth
just,
of work.
they have all of the same things we've been kind of talking about in volunteer, like the community build and
The
the
depth of their
natural
staff.
stuff.
I mean, sure, it's great, but
But I couldn't judge it based on the RFP requirements.
So I looked at the, with the absence of the design, any kind of draft design, I looked at the files that they submitted,
Yeah.
right? And in looking at all of them, they all sort of had a similar feel. They all were very structure heavy. They're very composite wood structure heavy, right? So I didn't see, they're the one vendor that's not necessarily affiliated with any one particular playground
Right.
manufacturer, right? So it seemed like to me, my take was, and you guys might disagree with this, but my take is that they sort of built their own structures, and those structures tend to look like Castle in the Trees and
Well,
like the
they
old
are
Friendship
tied,
Park.
they apprenticed with Leathers and Associates.
Right.
That's
I saw that part and I was like, ooh.
yeah.
But like, yeah, and I guess the question that I kept getting back to, and again, since you can't ask them questions, I'm like, some of the stuff looks good, but a lot of, I couldn't tell whether all of these were pictures for sure of places that they'd done. Maybe I assume they would have to put in a bid. But in terms of the pictures of the actual playgrounds that I could associate with them, they mostly looked very Castle in the Trees, which I love, but it's not
Right.
exactly.
We've been talking about a more open sort of more maintenance friendly type equipment, right? And the composite stuff isn't that, I don't think.
And it doesn't matter. Like, how do you sell yourselves to a town without providing the
Right.
basic documentations that they've asked
I'm with
for?
you. I mean, they
not-
their overall, for me, their overall recommendation criteria was mostly 3s, a couple of 4s. I felt like they gave us good references for work they've done, and they've obviously done a lot of.
Right, like Joey's Playground that
Right.
Adele and I both
Right.
know. And
They had
Which
a
I was
lot of
like,
work
that's great.
in
Yeah.
2015, 16, and 17 around here. But I went back to the playgrounds look very composite-y, you know? And without the information, with the sample design, it just, for me, that was what pushed it to the bottom for me.
It's like, because there were things like this in the middle, but then I didn't see this sort of thing in the actual playgrounds. I know that sounds weird, but like
in the shots.
in the shots of the playgrounds that they were specifying, and I'm going, is this a playground?
I
that
think
they
they have the
did.
capability to give us what they want. I actually
Right.
don't think otherwise, but the fact of the matter is if you can't prove it on paper,
Right, and I just
then I
kept
can't
on,
hire you.
and I kept going, I kept saying to myself, well, maybe they were really expecting to do a design day with us and come up with things, and that's what, but I would have expected some mock-up, or more to the point, I would assume that they would know that the town would have expected some.
Or some of these even certificates, like everybody, not
Well,
everybody,
that's
but
what I
most
was
people are
also
presenting
confused.
certificates of, we're insured and this and that. Like
Right.
there's, I'm sure that they are.
I was just
I don't
surprised,
doubt
I
that
thought
they
some of
are,
that was
but-
a required submittal
Yeah,
thing,
that's
and
the
I
one
didn't.
thing that wasn't there, the,
The
And
certificates, right?
That's why I kept on going, I was like, we must be missing something from them, but since we can't talk to them.
Just to be clear, we clarified with Steve that we had received everything, I guess with the exception of you, Adele.
We
Received
clarified with
everything that was
Steve and
printed.
Paul that we received everything,
So,
so
for me,
It's a
we
bummer
have,
that we can't
it,
go with them in my
Yeah.
mind, but we can't. I
Yeah.
mean, that's irresponsible. I think it would be irresponsible.
either it's irresponsible or it's, I don't know, it's.
Or it's going out on a limb. Everybody trust and jump with me.
And more to the point, I know that even if we wanted them, we have no argument for the other committee because they did not meet any of the town's, their documentation did
Right,
not
their
meet any of the
guidelines.
requirements. Therefore, we can't really argue them as a,
well, and frankly, I think some of the comfort level that we feel with them may be because of the discussions we've had over the last few meetings, because it's,
you pulled some of the stuff from them,
yeah,
so
I
we
mean,
have
we
some.
used a lot of the same words and a lot of the
Right.
same things, so that doesn't mean that, and that would be unfair to the other bidders to apply that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, but there's a
Absolutely.
reason that you, like, we, yes, you did use those, but we all liked, like, that as data that we were going with
Yeah.
because we liked it.
But that doesn't mean that we won't be able to get the same thing out of someone else that we choose, though,
Yeah.
too. And I think we kind of did, when we get to the top choice, I'll say that.
Yeah.
All right, so, in that case, at this point, we have Game Time, O'Brien and Sons, Play by Design, no, Ultiplay.
Now I'm gonna call it you to play.
Okay, I'm sorry, I've lost this. Game Time, O'Brien and Sons, and Ultiplay. And then there's the compound, which we slightly discussed, but I have differing opinions apparently than the rest of you. So.
and
That's okay.
I couldn't access O'Brien and Sons video.
Oh. Well, that does.
I think I had to download a player or something, to be fair, so I don't know that it was like.
I
And it was
didn't-
my son's computer, so I wasn't gonna.
I was
hear
able
ya.
Do
to
anything
view
with
it.
it.
I liked it.
What I did not like when I was looking at the sets that they were recommending
Yeah.
is that,
I'm sorry, who are we talking about?
O'Brien.
this is
Sorry.
O'Brien.
You're now
and
Sorry.
Sons.
discussing
Sorry.
O'Brien.
Do you want to discuss someone else? We
Oh,
just
that's
kind of
fine.
slipped into.
But if we want to
Yeah.
do that, it's fine. Whatever you want.
Sorry.
So landscape structures, O'Brien and Sons.
Yes.
Right. I found that their set designs that they recommended for a particular price did not include a whole bunch of stuff that is there in the picture, much less ramps. So I was concerned about this à la carte type pricing they have and whether they truly come within the bid area or not.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we did clarify with, I just want to say this up front. We did clarify with Steve that it would be safe to assume that the designs that were presented in this RFP were within the $400,000 budget. So I just want to say that up front as you move forward. So that's,
But they have the caveats in the picture that say, does not include X, Y, Z.
right.
And believe me, the print was pretty fine.
Where was?
It must
Can
be
you-
because I didn't.
Yeah, I
get
didn't see that. So can you bring up what you were talking about? Because I am.
The pamphlet for the two towers that were early in the,
In this thing?
yeah,
Um,
no, they were separate files.
yeah.
I think we have to be careful not to make any judgments on price.
Okay.
Right.
But these two, the Netplex brochure and the Play Odyssey brochure.
Where was it that we're looking at?
That's in my zipped stuff.
Because, I mean, are you basing it on what they had put in the, because that's just the brochure, right? So the brochure is not gonna give, I mean, this is the, is this the right one? No, this is not the right one. I kept getting lost in all of their documents, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna say that.
See, the Netplex wasn't universal design and wasn't wholly accessible. The other one was the Play Odyssey, but that was the one that
This is not the,
had,
do you remember which one is the actual?
it's in there, the Play Odyssey brochure.
So I guess I'm not interested in looking at the brochures so much because the brochures
They're not specific.
they're
to our
not specific to our project.
And I had to go by them because I couldn't see the video.
I thought is it only in the video? Is the visual only in the video?
I don't know if that's me or you. Okay, that's you
Yeah, no,
making that
that's
noise.
my ancient thing trying
Oh, mine will
to.
do that sometimes too.
Yeah, it's working really hard to get us this CD information.
So while you
So-
look at that, can I offer some generic feedback?
Yeah, I do just want to say one thing about it. On all of the research I've been doing prior to getting bids, this landscape structures company that they work with had come up all over the place. So I was excited to get information about them.
They are all over the place.
In
I've
general.
seen their equipment at
Right.
many playgrounds too.
Does
So I
anyone
anticipate that it
remember
can
the
live up to
Vimeo?
the thing. Like I
That's
kind of
good.
I did a lot of your same scoring thing and then also wrote notes, but
The video
felt like
info
it
is
did
down near
score
the
a little
bottom.
bit
It gives you.
high. One of
The-
my things,
the
my
hazard.
notes was, it said they would use a contractor for the installation
Oh,
and it could take up to 2 months.
Yeah,
And I was like, wait,
was that in the process document? There was a process document that sort of outlined from the start where somebody would be chosen down.
yes, in
Okay.
there.
Right.
And so I was like,
do you know which one of
You know,
this-
that's one thing, but that was one of my big concerns
Do you
with
remember
them.
where
I think
that
it was
was?
called design.
Yeah, I
Something
think it
design.
was.
Oh, the design process.
The other thing that was in there, I don't believe
this
the
was
community
the-
build was listed in that.
It wasn't, I have nothing about community. I didn't get a feel for it that there was
I thought the
any.
community build was mentioned in the introductory letter.
It was, but that was the only place.
Right.
So
But
the
And then
question is-
nowhere
process
did it
was
say
different.
anything about community input either, so.
Right, I didn't, I felt like that was in the introductory letter, but not in the process itself.
And to be super generic, I did like that they were like local and a woman owned the company and everything, but obviously I can't do that. I was just concerned about the contractor for installation and.
And I'm gonna say
Community
something
build.
about this one which is somewhat different. We did say we didn't want the towel structure over on the butter side. I love this
That
zip line
zip
thing, but that is going to be noisy as all whatever for our butters because it goes, you know, that's maybe not what you want to put against the abutters.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
know about the noise. We'll definitely address that in the,
Because I love that zipline thing in general. I like the fact that they have a seat for
I liked the
different
seat.
abilities.
that's a must for me,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
I thought that was really good. I thought there were two of them who had the seat for different abilities on the zipline, which I think Compton didn't. I think Compton had like double handhold.
Okay, I'd have to
one.
look at them.
Because there were a lot of things I liked about this one.
I like this area.
I like this area. I like the spinny thing. I like the little kids. There was a lot of things that I liked about it.
They included an area for the natural landform, but they didn't actually come up with a concept for it, which
Right.
is a little disappointing, but I felt like at least that they had included the area, so at least they were listening at that
Were
point.
they the company that, one of the companies said that they didn't include it intentionally because it requires a lot of engineering to do that. That wasn't this company, right?
I don't know.
No, I think
You
it
know what I'm talking
was, I think it was Game Time that did
Okay.
that.
All right.
I felt good about their references.
Yeah.
Overall, I felt like their recommendation criteria was all fours with, for me, there were, their references were 3, but I still felt like that they were good. It just looked like, looking at the numbers on the references, they had 250s and $360,000 projects and then some other smaller ones, but they're obviously a well-entrenched and well-respected playground contractor in this area. So it felt good. It just wasn't to me as strong as like Compton or some of the
Yeah.
other ones.
Agreed.
For me, this was one of my top 3.
This was definitely one of my top 3.
Would you be willing to say where you put it in your top 3?
For me, this was number
Or
2,
2?
and Compton was 3.
How about you? Oh, you didn't see
I
the
didn't
video. Well, now that you see the video on
Now that I see the
instant replay,
video, I do like it. I like that there's climbing structure above first ramp level because need to challenge those kids who need to be
oh,
challenged.
that actually got me back to, is this the one where where is the ramp?
But that's what I didn't see in the,
I don't think I saw a ramp in this one.
That's why there was one of them which I did not see a ramp, and I was like, how does it not have a ramp? It probably would have had to have a ramp. It doesn't have a ramp. But then I saw some other angle, and it was like, oh, there it is. I just couldn't see it from. So I don't. Sorry, I don't have my notes on this. Yeah, it doesn't have a ramp. There's no way for a second level of play for wheelchair stuff. So the problem is ramps are one thing, but I've read a lot of articles about inclusive and about how, sometimes it just gets, the ramps aren't necessarily fun play stuff. And if there's inclusive stuff with like structures, because they have like the whole netting thing along with the other structure, I mean,
It's a trade-off.
it's a trade-off, right?
They're good parallelly.
Right, because, I read one article, and I don't remember exactly what it was saying in detail, but it was kind of saying, there seems to be a theme with all, ADA compliant ones with, it's all a bunch of ramps, and it's boring and it just doesn't, there's not a lot of, like, you have the ramp so you can get up to the second level, but then
There's nothing to do once you're there.
Yeah, so I don't know.
To me, there wasn't really one design that really hit all of the buttons, right? For me.
Yes.
But what I tried to do with the designs was more just to look at it from, okay, how did they approach it? Did they do their homework and did they read the things and try to investigate what it is the community wants to see, right? And did they make any kind of did they try to plug stuff in that might just be a cost placeholder, just to say that, yeah, this is kind of what we were thinking? Because I mean, as we move forward, we're obviously going to have a lot of specific conversations about the stuff we want to see there.
That's part of why I kept on going back to the websites of, like, all of the ones who had overarching companies like Landscape Structures or Play World or Game Time. I kept going back to the websites because no matter what we get in the bid, if in theory we have input into the end design, what is on their website is at least as important in the bid process once they're seen. Once you see that the bid process covers enough of the RFP requirements, if you're not happy with the specifics, if you go to their websites, and that was where I was digging a little deeper.
Did you say, I'm sorry, by the way, Elizabeth and Adele, where you guys had this ranked? I understand your ranking system, again, didn't include one.
Yeah. It was definitely in my top 3. I honestly, I have a top 3, but I don't have a good order.
That's okay.
That's all right.
Because I kept going back and forth and I'm like,
It's
nah.
hard. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really hard. There's definitely not one that just stood out.
And I guess I expected to come in, based on all the landscape structure stuff I'd seen, I expected to rank them high.
Mm-hmm.
And I did rank them high. I kind of went in expecting to rank them like the top, just because of the stuff I'd researched beforehand. But I did actually like the other 2.
Was this in your top 3, Adele?
I hadn't gotten to see the videos.
The
I was
video,
going
okay. Yeah.
based on the brochures where I didn't see
Okay. I'm just kind of doing it for no
Ex-
purposes, so when we
Yeah.
come back to try to move forward with our recommendation.
What I want to avoid is to have isolated equipment around the playground that is accessible, but the main climbing stuff isn't.
Right.
Right, you want it to be inclusive.
Uh-huh.
Like you have a seat. I saw one design that had like a seat stuck out in the middle of like this giant
Yes.
wood fiber thing, and it's like, how much fun is that going to be?
Like,
You know?
woohoo!
You could play by yourself way over there.
Now, there's something called a rocker, which sits 6 people.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
The
That was
sway
cool.
thing that
Yeah.
I've
There's
seen.
lots of cool stuff out there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I actually really liked Game Time.
I did too. Oh, sorry. Do we want to talk about O'Brien?
Let's go to, do we have anything else left?
You really, I'm just gonna say it now. You really should look at Ultiplay if you like Game Time,
Okay.
because I think at this point, Ultiplay, Game Time, and O'Brien and Sons were my top 3, not in any particular order. I don't know.
Before we move off of O'Brien, I just want to say that I didn't spend a ton of time at this, but 2 of the things that I did look at going back to the recommendation criteria were the quality of the equipment. The 3 top choices that I had, I felt like looking at the joinery that they used and sort of the things that were connecting and all seemed to be very low maintenance and seemed to be, they at least talked about it, right? So they used the right words.
Says the one who's into woodworking. So we
Well, but
yeah.
it's a big, I mean, maintenance
No,
is going
I
to be a big
appreciate
issue, right?
that you are considering that as a.
Absolutely.
I'm not making a crack about it. I'm saying I appreciate
You have a
that
different
you have,
eye on it.
You're
Yep.
looking at that from that
But
perspective.
one of the, because I also, just as an aside, I Googled like problems with playground equipment, and it seemed like a lot of the things came back with the joinery, like the joinery fails or stuff splits or cables fray or all that kind of stuff. And it seemed like they talked a lot about that in my top 3, and which was O'Brien was one, or Landscape Structures was one of those. For the criteria, the recommendation criteria, I felt like that they had, they scored, I may have said this already, but they were like all 4s, with the exception of the references, and that was because there were some smaller projects there. But anyway, that was all I wanted to share.
Okay, that's great. Who do we want to do next? Game Time and then end with Ultiplay?
Yeah. That works for me.
Okay.
I guess the only question is, do we need to leave more space? Do you want to look at the Altiplay stuff at all while we're doing other ones, so you have some heads up on them, or,
I'm trying to see if, my big thing with Game Time is that it was not only accessible, it was very inclusive.
Mhm.
And there are a mix of surfaces and, but that I didn't see in there that they demonstrated timely delivery. And there was something about them that made me concerned about, how long they would be there. And I didn't flesh out the
what do you
note.
mean, how long they would, oh, you don't know?
How
In
long they would
25 years.
continue to exist.
Oh. So I think I found this one really ramp heavy, but like in a, like good.
But it gets you up to all these different
Right.
places where you can actually do things with people.
I
My-
guess,
sorry.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Maybe I just want to see ramps broken up with more ways to climb up on the sides. Like, I don't know. It's
But
probably
they
the
do,
structures of.
there's a lot of little things all along the sides.
Oh, this one struck me as odd with their engineered wood fire with their little
With the port place
paths.
pathways.
And I was like, why wouldn't you put and this is a minor stupid thing, but it did make me go like, if you're thinking about this, if this green path is the accessible way to get over there, which you can't really see, why would you put the accessible chair as far away from the path as possible? But and the only reason I bring that up, I mean, it's a finer point, but I was like,
Yeah.
it seems like maybe you'd be missing something if that's what I don't know, maybe you're not taking into consideration.
My overall was, I didn't see inclusive used in their letter. I felt like they had a good equipment mix, but like, for instance, there was a merry-go-all that they used in, but it wasn't, that one was not wheelchair accessible, which I've seen some that are, that you can actually roll into, which I was a little disappointed to see that, but, I had
I
this.
thought you could transfer into it.
I think you can lift and place somebody in there, but they have actually merry-go-round type things where you can actually wheel in, where they're set in the ground. And again, I don't want to judge them by just one piece of equipment, but to me, that was a sort of a telling thing.
Okay.
In looking at their references, they had a big project in 2016 in New York City that was like 700, and then they had like a $400,000 reference in 2013, and the rest were lower end. So I didn't give them the full 4 on that. Most of their scores were 3s with a few 4s for me and their recommendation criteria. Their equipment is coming from Alabama, where Compton is coming from Texas, and
Obviously, we go comping. I'm from Texas. Just saying.
just to say it's a further distance, so that may
Yeah.
lead to some
Absolutely.
sometimes
Shipping
too,
issue.
right? And the others, like O'Brien and Sons, is coming from Minnesota, so I was looking at that as a favorable distance. I didn't see for my satisfaction enough about community build or public input. None of those things to me weren't included in
Yeah, I have questions.
the cover. That, and for me, that just kind of sank the ship on that one for me.
It felt really similar to, I don't know if you've been to Ronan McElliott in Westford. I feel like this is
That's
that
what the
playground,
structure-
but in different colors. And again, I
And-
didn't get a supernatural
Right.
feeling from
And I guess
this.
that's what confused me, because I liked a lot of the stuff on their website. They have a lot of, they have a whole thing about bringing nature into play and nature stuff and all this, and I was like, where was it in your?
I mean, again, I get that it's green and brown, but that does not.
Right, and I did kind of feel like we were getting green and brown from people as the.
Which
nature.
I understand why they're doing that, but
Right.
I was hoping for more.
And I guess I
This
keep coming back to.
Underwhelmed me.
Is it partially due to how the RFP was written, that we're getting stuff that isn't as nature-y themed?
maybe, but we can't go backwards.
Yeah,
No.
but we've gotten, I feel like we've gotten some. I mean, I feel like that we've gotten some. I think some of the,
I mean, they do have
proposals
these
included.
things, like, right,
you know,
I guess my confusion is, like, they had a couple things in there, but if you look at their website,
They've had so much
they
more.
have so much more nature things, and they threw in, like, one log and one step.
I don't know if this is the one or not, but one of them had like a jungle theme, like a toucan nature theme, which I thought was kind of weird. But then again, I was trying not to judge too much on the design, so.
Yeah.
On the one they proposed?
Somebody did. I remember seeing a toucan in
Was
some
it
palm
Little
leaves.
Tykes?
It's like,
I
well,
feel like it could have
nature
been Little
just
Tykes.
not
Jeffrey's
new.
Jungle that was listed as one of the,
Yeah, I don't know. I just saw it. It was in one of the designs.
or Josh's
Oh,
Jungle.
Josh's Jungle. So
Josh's
there was a
Jungle.
whole bunch of information about Josh's Jungle on one of them, which gave a lot of good information about a previous playground, which if you were doing a zoo that, or jungle, like they did a good job with that, and that was not this company.
Did they? I don't.
No,
Can you
that was
remind me if Game
Childscapes.
Time had a natural landform? I don't remember seeing.
I don't recall seeing
I
one.
think that they were the ones who wrote, and it took me a while to find this. I was like, where's your natural landform? Because I kind of like you otherwise. And it says, possible landform play area
In this
in
little
this,
thing?
in this little
Good for
thing.
you that you can
And
do that.
I was trying to look in the details. I was trying to zoom in to read some of the other stuff, and then I suddenly saw that note, which is frankly in a way that I mean, I look at schematics all the time, but
So
the
these
way
are the
that was-
people that purposely left it out.
they basically said, and I'm conflicted on the fact that they said this, and that it's good. It said, we did not include this in our proposal because of the amount of engineering work required to do it properly. For example, for the mound to withstand surfacing and play equipment, it needs to be built and compacted at 6-inch increments, otherwise it will constantly wash away. So, that's good information.
Sure.
Does that mean that they would do it, or they wouldn't do it, or they just didn't have time to
They-
come up with it,
Or they wanted us to reconsider it.
I assume, kind of reading it, that they wanted us to reconsider it and say, hey, you guys didn't think this through. And maybe I kept coming back to, does it mean that they don't think they could do it within the budget? Because, and if so, are these other companies, like I think they're trying to make a point that, yeah, you do have to do it the right way. And so if other companies have included it, will it wash away? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so, like, I don't want to say, oh, they didn't give it to us and they said, oh, it's going to take too much, and be like, oh, well, they're off the block, when they could just be pointing out a really,
Yeah, for
real
me that wasn't a
engineering.
disqualification because even in the RFP it wasn't very clear. It said, town of Chelmsford is going to do some stuff, some of these things are going to be hashed out. And so I'm sure for a lot of these people it's like, what exactly are you going to do? Because 10 here, 10 there, 25 here, they're like, we, have to leave wiggle room. So I mean, I feel for them on that.
what you said about how it looks like the Ronan McElliott one. I think that's what I was trying to get at with the article that I'd read, where they
With the ramps.
all the ones with the ramps, they tend to start looking the same, and that's an unfair statement because all the ones without the ramps historically have kind of looked the same. But like, I think there's so many more imaginative things. It's hard to know what we can include. I don't know, and give enough variation to, and kids who aren't in wheelchairs have fun running on ramps. But I don't know. I like.
For me, there was just better ones. I mean, not that this was bad. This, was not in my bottom three.
It wasn't in your top three though.
No, I think it was right in the middle.
Okay.
It's the same with me. This
Yep.
was fourth for me.
Yep. So, but this brings me to my favorite one, if we're ready
Does
to.
that mean Ultiplay is your favorite?
I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably.
I guess I just
if I
want
had
to.
to pick a favorite, it's hard because once we're in those top three, I
I
agree
want
with you,
to.
it's
I just
fluid,
want to say
but-
one last thing about this, which is, I may be being swayed by what's not in the bid. They have a lot of good things about inclusive and community build and other things on their website.
Game time.
And I don't
Okay.
game time.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's fair in this day and age to say what you get in a bid is all that you'll be looking at. I would assume that anyone in this day and age expects people to do research on the company online. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe like historically before the internet, I'm sure all you got and all you really knew was that. There's so much information about all of these companies and what they have available online and what their, you know, other products are and what their other, you know, I guess I kept getting back to, is it possible that they've gone with a certain thing here, but we could modify it with all of the things that they have to.
We actually don't want any
More-
of this. Redo your
Well, like
design
like
and
we
throw
like
in
some-
these, like that.
Yeah, but
Right,
I-
so like this is their main page for nature themed, right? And they have all sorts of, and I guess part of the thing is I kept getting back to is I see a lot of nature themed stuff, like
Why weren't we delivered
why
this?
weren't we delivered it? But then there's a lot of nature themed stuff and a lot of inclusive stuff, and maybe it's just hard to marry the two. Maybe they have all of this cool stuff, but they don't marry their lines well, and so they went with inclusive instead of. But and because we can't ask them questions, I just don't know.
Well, to keep it
driving me
fair, we
crazy.
have to stick with what we were given, right? We have to stick with the RFP, and as a segue, I'll say that I felt like Ultiplay did address, best of all, to me, they were the one that did their homework. I mean, when I read their letter, they pretty much dictated back what I was hoping to hear from everyone. And I felt like their structures were open and consistent with kind of the theme. And I felt like, and I'll cite just the one, they had a, I forget what they called it. It was like this old school climbing structure, like the dome,
Geodesic.
like that, but they reimagined it.
This
and,
thing.
Yeah.
And it was cool because they opened up the holes so you could climb on the frame of it, but then they opened up the sides so you could get wheelchairs and access into the interior part of it. And then they had structures on the inside that
Oh,
people
and this
with
has climbed through things.
people could
that the
climb
other
up on,
ones
And
even
it
if
has
they're in
the little
wheelchairs.
hole, like the little things that are good for people who need less stimulus to go in the.
Yeah.
And then also things for people who want the sensory input, or I liked the rocker where, you know, they could feel the proprioceptive from the chair.
Right, and they have the whole music section.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me, but again,
I have to say, the
that's a personal
aesthetic,
thing. My
the
kids
aesthetic
were-
of it was not my favorite. And I
Agreed.
know
I
that that
don't
is
love the
not
aesthetic
I'm
the
at
with
way
all.
you.
we should choose it, but the aesthetic of it, quite frankly, made it not something I was looking at as much.
It's so interesting that we all said it has an ick aesthetic, but it really checks the most.
Well, and it's funny
boxes.
because like
See, I
both-
don't find it having an ick aesthetic.
it
so.
just doesn't have the like.
It doesn't have that splash. It doesn't have a certain panache, I guess. You know, it doesn't have the comp.
It's like
Yeah.
well, it's just got a lot of
Je ne
what.
sais quoi.
Yeah, it's got a lot of singular metal bars. I don't know what else to say.
No, it's fair because I feel all of that, and I mean, I would say exactly the same thing. I scored it the highest, you know, based on checking the boxes.
Right.
What did our RFP
How's
or the
this all
town's
ran for
RFP
me?
ask them to do? Did they appear to have read it, listened to it? Just
They-
because I don't like how it looks, but there is a music area, there is a this. That's how I felt when we were car shopping, right? I don't like how this car looks, but it totally is checking all the boxes.
Well, that's what I keep getting. Yeah, exactly.
So-
There's like cars that I love how they look, but and when you look at researching them, you go, oh, functionally, and I always choose function over form, and I
that's
assume that's
why-
because of my engineering background. But it doesn't have any of the aesthetic when I look at it that makes me go, oh, that's like and it doesn't have to be a pretty place. And the important thing is that the kids have fun. I mean, and I know that was a comment in one of the surveys is that don't
Don't unfun it.
don't care about what the
Don't
parents
spend
visually.
on the look, spend on the fun value.
Right. The question is, where's the.
Well, maybe in different color scheme.
Well, it's green and brown. I mean,
Yeah.
I
There's
just
some gray and tan.
I
I know.
I don't know. Again, they have. When I look at the stuff that's available.
You felt like they had better stuff on their website too?
Wait, so who was Playworld?
Ultiplay.
Oh, it is?
Mhm.
Okay. Because on Ultiplay's... Alright, yeah, so Ultiplay which I'm not seeing on there. I'm not seeing Play World. Why am I not seeing Play World?
I don't know.
Oh, there. Okay. So Play World has a lot of great stuff on their website. A lot of really interesting things. A lot of good stuff that. A lot of stuff that
Has
aesthetically I
cooler
like better.
stuff. Give it the
Um,
cool factor.
No, I mean.
I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm like just
Yeah,
trying
no.
to
I'm trying to
put a word to the feelings.
I'm trying to remember.
So I just want to, while you're going through that, looking at the recommendation criteria from the RFP, this was one of the two, I think maybe one of the two on my rankings that got all fours. I felt good about the equipment, I felt good about their ability to deliver what they were promising, and I felt good about their references. It seemed like that they had been very busy in New England and specifically in Massachusetts since 2010. They had a lot of breakouts for projects that they were working on. I mentioned earlier that I felt like they were the only one who really touched all of the community build, inclusive, public input buttons. They even mentioned the school sessions, which was interesting, that they had actually gone back and done the research and found that somewhere. And to me, that says that that's a partner that's willing to work with you and collaborate. And because that's going to be one of our big challenges, I think, moving forward, is finding someone that's going to work with us on the design, because we all have so many different specifics that we want to see put into it. And to me, that communicated an openness to that possibility. So that was really kind of one of the ticks that helped push me over. And that was one of the criteria that I saw listed in throughout the RFP. So I felt like that was applicable as well. Nobody really incorporated the existing entry structure into the design, and it's probably for the best because it's gone now.
Right, I wrote NA. I guess if you did, it doesn't matter anymore.
On what? I'm
But
sorry.
they had a good mix
Big-
of surfaces, I thought, too,
Okay.
so that was it. But
Yeah, the entrance structure.
Ah.
DPW had hoped to preserve that, and apparently that didn't happen, as it was a little old.
the only thing that they didn't mention, and nobody mentioned this, was the sponsorship and fundraising
Yes.
component to it.
Yeah.
But nobody mentioned it, so I didn't take points off for that at all.
Actually,
I think Play by Design did.
Play by
Oh,
Design
yeah,
did.
Yeah,
You know, that's how it goes, right?
yeah,
And they
One of the
essentially saying, let us help you
right. They have a whole program set
fundraise
up
and,
where we had gotten it from.
Yeah.
This was my top choice recommendation.
Yes. Mine as well.
I keep getting back to the aesthetic, and maybe that's not a good place to.
Who's to say what a good place is? We're all coming from different places, just trying to do the
Yeah.
best.
I mean, and honestly, there's a 0.2 difference between this and my second choice, which was O'Brien's Son's landscape structures.
So I did not see any, like, maybe I'm missing something. There's no big slide, right? There's no tall thing for
Climbing
kids to
thing.
climb. And that's, I think, what kept on getting me originally, is there's nothing to go vertical.
They did have the slide on the hill. It was hard to tell how high that
Yeah,
might be
but-
vertically
and
short.
that's, I mean, but it
But they
doesn't.
did have the circle one, so I think that's a little bit taller.
I just, in terms of, so I'm
Not
someone
saying
who
it's
literally climbed the tall structures and like, my favorite playground when I was a kid, I climbed every roof in the playground to try to get up to the highest point. I even ended up climbing the, like, utility shack next to it, because I like to climb. And I think when I keep looking at this, I don't see anything that's more than 5 feet off.
what is that structure?
That's just the top of the, I don't think there's any way to get up there. I think it's just a,
A shade?
honestly, I can't even make out what I'm looking
They
at.
had a name for that was clever. Now I don't remember what it was.
There's just, like, a lot of the other ones had big, cool slides. There's not a single big slide on this,
Yeah.
like, at all. There's nothing,
2 and 3 story slides on the
Do you
others.
feel?
Right.
Do you feel? You did some research on the Playworld site. Do you feel like that they have that
right, so,
offering,
well,
and that it just wasn't included in the draft design?
I think I might be getting this. Well, that looks a lot like, in fact, that's exactly what they have suggested to us. Pretty much identical. I don't know, I think it might be hard to see some of what they have offered because when you have wires across, which I think is part of their climbing structure theory, it's hard to have it show up in the visual of, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Mhm.
See, like, there's this whole thing,
Right.
like, visually from above, and I'm not seeing it.
It's this.
Okay, so that's all like 3 feet off the ground, right? Maybe. Right, it probably goes up to a height of
About 4 feet.
maybe 4 feet off the ground, possibly, but I think it's like all 3 feet off the ground. I don't know. They have a lot of cool things, and it's all over the place, and there's stuff for smaller kids. But I do think that there's not a lot of vertical. There's nowhere for kids to go up somewhere and be up together somewhere.
Do you think that's a limitation of the draft design or a limitation of their product offering?
Trying to pull up the.
And is that a deal breaker? I mean, even reading through the highlights of their design, they said, you know, a small structure with plenty of activities that includes a steel slide for children with cochlear implants. And you're like, wow.
They really did read the thing.
Exactly. They read and they
Right.
truly.
I just.
But to your point too, though, one of the comments that I've heard back from both the equipment survey and then just talking to kids, right, is they love the twisty slide, right? They love
Right.
the height and they love the twisty slide.
Right,
So
and
that's
there were
really
some
gotta be
very
part-
cool slides offered on the other designs.
Right.
Yeah.
And this one has,
It
it
has
has
a
a
twisty
twisty
slide.
slide, but it's
I guess I couldn't really
Fairly
tell.
tame.
it's got to be very small because that's a small person,
Yeah.
right? Like, I just, honestly, I'm realizing now looking at this, I went back during the last few months and drove by my favorite previous park when I was growing up in Winchester, and it has been taken down because it was a wood structure, and it is replaced by something like this. And when I saw it, I went, oh, and I went, oh, it doesn't have any of the things I used to climb. Like, I just feel, and maybe I know you keep asking me whether that's a problem with what they have available completely, or whether it's just what they offered us, and I will try to look while we talk more, but that bothers me. And I know we had comments from some people about making sure that there were things to climb. I don't know. I
Well,
can't.
the other part of it would be that you know, if we're truly going for the inclusive design, we don't want to put a structure up that isn't going to allow. I mean, maybe we have one structure that you can't.
50% of the climbing structures or climbing structure
But
space.
we don't want to put like a really cool twisty slide. There was one that I saw that was like this 3-story thing that had like this climbing thing. You had to go in and around a basket to get up, and it looked like fun. But I can only imagine being in a wheelchair and seeing that and just breaking down in tears, you know, because you couldn't even get to the second level to do anything with it. You know what I mean?
I guess there's a
So-
fine line between like making sure that there's a lot of inclusive things, but not giving kids who don't have limitations.
Yeah, you don't want.
Yeah.
We don't want. I mean,
You
to,
want,
Tall,
it's a
cool
balancing act.
Things. I
for
don't.
Sure.
I mean, we definitely want people to be able to do things of all abilities, but I don't want really serious climbing kids who just want to scale the tallest tower
right.
to have no.
Yes, yeah.
You know,
You want them to have an outlet.
I
And we
that's
want them
important.
to have that gross motor exercise.
Right. I think it's really important. I mean, I'm trying to think. I think I was confusing Altiplay with someone else. So this is an Altiplay thing. They have some taller stuff. Oh, I think they're the ones who had some very interesting parts. I think what this is. I'm sorry, I just did not have the time to write stuff down. I had barely enough time to look at things.
Well, and again, we're supposed to be judging this based on what the RFP includes. So
Right.
this is kind of over and above. But if you've got a concern that they don't have the
I have a
product
concern that
offering.
they don't have the tall stuff where, like, even though they have some climbing things with these ropes and stuff, there's no upper level where kids can be together,
And that's a valid point,
Yeah.
very valid.
and that bothers me.
And that's okay. So Bill and I ranked this as our number one. Where do you rank it?
Oh, I thought they had cool stuff, so it was in my top three.
It was
but
in your
I don't.
top three. Because we found nothing was perfect. Yes.
Yeah, Jim, do you have a?
You know, a lot of these things, you know, I think if you went in and said, well, you don't have quite the right thing, can you order it from these guys and bring it in?
Well, most of these that we're talking about only are a particular company. They would only
Yeah,
work
I
within their.
know,
But I'm trying to look at. I'm
they
trying to look at
flexible
what they
enough?
have on their
It has to be
website.
one
One
only
manufacturer.
What
Steve
manufacturer, what
Steve
provider?
specifically asked for one.
one
equipment
manufacturer, because these guys all deal in exclusives, yeah, it has to
Yeah.
be just one,
Okay.
so.
So it's not clear to us if they have the ability or not, but it's hard to know that of.
Yeah, and we left the RFP was left open, so any designer, non-affiliated designer or not, could have supplied an RFP. We only got one, right? So everybody else other than Play by Design was affiliated with a particular manufacturer. So there's companies out there
No,
that,
I understand that, I'm looking at the logic that one place is not affiliated, and that's fine, but then you're saying that the others all have to do within their inventory.
right,
Okay.
It's probably, franchise rules kind of thing. But it's
so,
also very hard to marry together pieces from two different companies.
Separated and everything, I don't know.
so it sounds like we don't have a consensus number one choice. So, why do we have a consensus top two choice?
I mean, I guess I'm trying to look at this video that they have of what is pretty much what they suggested, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
It's pretty similar.
I don't know. I want to like them more. I don't feel the nature element of it.
I would agree there. They're not as naturey as I would like, but nobody hit all my buttons, you know.
Right. I
And so
think
it was
I
just
think
that.
Game Time and O'Brien and Sons were my top two.
Okay.
But
Adele, would you be willing to say who your top two might be? You don't have to give an order, just in general.
Game Time and I think I would want to look at O'Brien and Sons again, just to see if they had.
you weren't able
Something.
to see the Vimeo, right?
Although I love these kind of,
Right. There's a lot of things to like.
but
That
there
they-
isn't that one component that we both wanted, which was that multi-story climbing thing.
Right. There's no multi-story climbing thing. There's no space where kids can get up away from the adults and be together and run and that is something kids like to do.
Especially as they get towards that older end where they're
Right.
almost too old for the playground,
I
but
mean,
not quite.
there's lots of things to scale. There's a lot of really cool things on this multiplay thing. I cannot disagree with that. I don't feel the nature theme, and I don't like that there's no upper levels to run on.
So, Bill, would you be willing to say your top two were
Sure.
Ultiplay and
My top two were Ultiplay and O'Brien and
O'Brien?
Sons.
Yep.
Game Time was fourth for me, and I was just going back to my notes to see why.
So my top two are exactly the same as yours. And regardless, everybody has O'Brien and Sons in there. I'm not saying that we have to vote and that's that. It's just to thinking about the two people moving forward with that majority and minority consensus, it sounds like O'Brien and Sons, although it might not be everybody's first, it's ranked highly.
The question is it anyone's first?
I don't think it's anybody's first, but
Well, I would feel good about them. I mean, if we went with them, I would certainly feel good about them.
I would really want to clarify that install will take 2 months, because if it's not
Oh,
done.
so where was,
They had this nice little timeline of like how things had to happen or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that struck me as very,
structured?
I was gonna say, if you excuse the pun.
And it seemed to be lacking on the public input side of things, but I'm assuming that that's all stuff that can be worked out.
Right.
Because those are details that really, they were kind of mentioned in the RFP, but they really weren't specific.
Well, that's what I keep coming back to, is how much of it is a what's in our head versus what they were actually told, right? So like, what are we presented? Are we presented with things that don't match what's in our head because they don't know what's in our head? Or are we presented with things that's not in our head because
It's not their thing.
it's just not what they do? And I think, given that I had feelings about certain things that weren't emphasized enough in the RFP going out, I'm not surprised that some of these don't have as
Yeah.
much, you know, I don't know.
I just want to try to keep the process moving forward.
Yeah.
I understand the frustration with where we're at and where we've been.
I think I got turned off by their process.
Sure. I
More
think a
than
lot of
anything.
us got a bad taste. So trying to think, if we can come to a consensus on one or a consensus on the 1 and 2, I'm getting for sure we would say Ultiplay O'Brien as a majority, or not as a majority minority, but as a top 2 from this group.
I think O'Brien, it sounds like since that's at least on all of our list, I think we would say that's
Yeah, they didn't have any,
a top. And I don't know if the second would be Ultiplay or Game Time. That seems, those 3 seem to be the ones that
those are
everyone.
definitely my top 3. There are cool things about O'Brien and Sons. There are things that they are missing. They don't have any ramps,
Oh.
right? I don't know if they have transfer point things that I can't detect, because I don't know what I'm looking at for transfer points. I don't know.
And from this design, it's kind of hard to see. It's also very set width stuff.
Are we talking about O'Brien or
O'Brien.
O'Brien set width?
So that, is there any flexibility in terms of making the initial level of a play structure?
Also, is this all wood fiber underneath the play structures and then not around it?
Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a mix.
I don't think landscape structures had any poured in place, did it?
I think maybe it
I
was like
thought-
the pathway, but
Oh, right.
Like, those are poured in place, right? I think those green areas.
But around the structures themselves, they're not.
Well,
Oh,
that's-
no, right.
They're,
the landing pads. Oh no, that's O'Brien.
like, the majority of the, I think this dark green is all poured in place. I think.
See, I would have thought it was the kind of artificial turf
Well, I think that
with
the,
rubber
this,
underneath.
I think that's poured in place and that's artificial turf or grass, right?
Okay.
Because that's darker green and that looks more like grass.
Okay.
Could be making this up, but you see how that's at the base of this
Mhm.
and at the base
So-
of this. But this sort of thing is a little weird, right? So you have it at the landing spot, but it's not like
It's a fall zone.
right. But in terms of access,
I'm curious, will Steve and this committee of us two and them have a chance, or do you think address any of these concerns with a company before putting forth, or do we think it's gonna still kind of be like this,
Well,
just
they-
based on what we got?
they did say we could have more than one and go back with questions in theory.
At the bid award meeting that I attended at Alpha Road, I think it was on the 14th of December, someone asked if there would be a second round where they'd shortlist a number of them and then have sort of a
Right.
Bid off.
Mhm.
bid off thing. And they said that was Gary Persichetti said that was he didn't say possibility, but he said it wouldn't be out of the question, right? So I guess it's possible. So,
if we wanted to say, here are our top 2 recommendations, and maybe make a very short list of, if possible, to have these questions clarified, maybe that's a good way to go forward.
I think going into the meeting with them with a list of questions for our top 2 or top 3 would be a good exercise.
I'd feel more comfortable with 3 only because, say, one can't do ramps and interesting sidewalls for, we wanted things with animal tracks and all sorts of things that kids could play with that were on the sidewalls of these areas.
More custom stuff.
More
Like,
custom
is there
stuff.
an opportunity to do more custom work than what's
Or-
been presented? Is that what you're?
Not even custom work. There are pre-made things like tic-tac-toe boards and all sorts of different games that you can play with metallic mirrors and plexiglass drawing areas.
Yeah, one of these things had the drawing areas. Was that,
That was a separate area from,
which one was that though? That was, anyone remember?
I think it was play by design.
No.
No?
I want to, oh, it might have been,
No, it was definitely not Little Tux.
So,
The art
let's
area.
not necessarily, let's not necessarily rank them in order, but what are the 3 that we want to move forward with?
I would think Ultiplay, O'Brien and Sons, and
Game Time is my,
Game Time or Compin.
Okay. Danielle,
I
do you have
mean, if I had to choose between, O'Brien, mine would be Ultiplay, O'Brien, and based on how I had to rank them, Compin. Just because I had Compin 3, Game Time 4. It doesn't really matter.
does anyone else worry about Compin has literally nothing about community build? Like, you can search their website for it and they don't.
Yeah, that was troubling
Have
for
it.
me.
trouble.
And I assume that has something to do with, you're dealing with a lot of wires under tension. You're not gonna want random people setting that up. That's gonna be a very specific skill set to hook up without causing eye removal.
Right.
I could be wrong.
So what are your 3?
Me?
Yeah.
Game Time, O'Brien and Sons, and Multiplay, I think.
I could go with either. I could go with either Compin or Game Time, and I see the concerns with,
They just have different concerns.
I have
yeah.
concerns with all of them at this
Okay.
point. Like, the more I
Yeah.
think about them, the more I'm like, I know I
Alright.
liked all of these at one point, but
I-
now I'm just picking them all apart.
I see Compin as being really kind of cutting edge design wise, and,
Yeah.
and the concerns. I don't know if that fits the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, maybe it's too much. But then again, I love it. Like I would love to see that, and to me, that's a very natural, organic looking shapes and stuff. That to me, that sort of echoes back the nature part of it. So, and they're obviously a well respected playground equipment provider.
So we just need to narrow it down. Game Time or Compin?
I guess I think Compin, along what you just said, I think you are going to get much more, it's an eyesore commentary
Oh, I don't
from the
think
neighborhood.
so.
I could be wrong.
Can,
It's my 2 cents.
can
Maybe
you bring
this,
up pictures of it?
Yeah.
Again?
I could just also say, like, shall we take a vote and see if we get somewhere doing that between Compin and Game Time, so that we can proceed with our list of 3 and questions and nominate 2 people.
Yeah, see, like with Game Time, I didn't get the whole community build thing. I didn't see that there with them. I didn't see a commitment to that. I didn't see inclusive in their letterhead. I saw the thing that they referenced was creating the best playground in Massachusetts, and to me, that's not our goal.
I
Well,
did see
then
that, and
shall we
I
just
did
say-
split on, I was like, well,
Flattery will get you nowhere with that.
that's
Can I make a
not
motion
exactly.
Then, instead of going forward with 3 companies, since we can't decide the 3 and 4, we have 2, that we go forward with 2 companies? Like, would everybody be comfortable with that?
Yeah.
O'Brien and Sons, and
And Ultiplay.
that's
I
my
don't
top
know.
2.
I keep, maybe I should reconsider Compom.
Actually, as much as I love a lot of the stuff that they have, because it's webbing, and kids love climbing in the webbing. And it is several stories. What we can do is go with the 3 in terms of game time, and whatever each group is lacking, ask them whether they can add that to.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We have 2 companies for sure that we know we're going to make some questions, because neither one of them is perfect. The real question is, do we need to have a 3rd? And the 3rd is the one we can't agree on.
You know,
So if we can't agree, do we need it?
I don't know. I have. Well, there are a lot of things I like about Compom. I think between Compom and Ultiplay,
My concern is O'Brien doesn't have ramps, and it doesn't have, and Altaplay does not have the higher structures.
right.
So if neither of them can deliver those things that they're missing,
So Compom had like all engineered wood fiber, right? If
Yes.
all engineered wood fiber everywhere. Their tracks are double handheld things.
no, I didn't realize that, okay. That would take
You
them
don't
off
think that the
for me.
walkways are?
And that may have been a function of budget too, because maybe
Right.
the equipment's more expensive, so they couldn't afford within the $400 framework to put in surfaces, right?
And we just have to realize too, these questions that we have, they may or may not get answered before this gets put forth to the, Board of Selectmen. Or before the committee of 5 or 6 next has to vote.
Yeah, I guess upon what you just said, I'm wondering if these are just more expensive pieces of equipment, because it feels like there's, I don't know. I liked their orbital spinny things. Like, those were cool. They have both the big one for people and the little individual ones. And I really do like that they have a lot going on for the little kids. Like, that's really cool. And they do have a very tall tower for climbing, and there is a place for multiple people to be up there, and a really cool slide. I don't know. There's so many different.
I think I would personally would go with game time over them.
Okay, so
So
that's
why
your
would you
vote?
go with game time over them?
I think game time was the one that had the more fun climbing.
This is game time.
Then it's not,
1 second.
the tallest structure.
Yeah. This had, that was a cool story. They have ramps, and they have ramps, and they have a tall slide. They have ramps that allow you to get to the lower level. That's, I did like that about that they had an upper level that ramps could get to. They did have one beyond that was tall enough that they have it completely enclosed up there because of obviously concerns about falling from that level. They obviously have the netting thing to the side, which is kind of like oh yeah, we can do. That seemed like a weird design item, but.
So I completely hear what you're saying. I'm just asking you both to make a decision. I understand that there's not a good decision, right? Like it's not a clear, but you do ultimately, like in picking our next president, have to make a choice. So if you
I've made
ladies
mine.
could, yours would be game time.
Yes.
Okay, great.
I think there's more going on for game time. I
Okay.
think you have more. You have the large wheelchair ramp with things on it. And you have the multi-level tower with really cool slides and lower level slides, including a metal slide. Were there metal slides on all of them? I don't know.
One of them did have a roller bar slide.
Yeah, this one has a roller bar slide
Okay.
there.
Okay, so I am comfortable, are you comfortable? Can I set forth that we are 3 going forward, O'Brien, Ultiplay, and as a third, Game Time?
Yes.
Is that something, I
Are
mean,
you
I'll
okay with
vote
it?
that way if we need to
Yes.
put it to a vote.
I
but-
think that if we chose one of those vendors, I think we'd be in a good place.
Okay, so I'm gonna say we don't need to vote on this, this is our consensus, or do we want to take a vote to be formal? I'll make a motion if so.
I think we
I don't
should,
think we wanna,
I think we should take a vote on our top 3, yeah.
Okay.
which the top
All
four
right,
are.
so I'll make a motion to vote on our top 3 choices going forward for our 2 reps at the next meeting. O'Brien, Ultiplay, and Game Time.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Oh,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great.
Unanimous.
Okay, so if we could begin to address, these questions, hopefully they would get answered before, but they may not. Would we like to start with O'Brien? And I know I heard ramps and set widths being a concern,
And then the community build,
and community build, yep.
They said it was a blended build, right? They're the ones who said blended build.
I think they might have been. I remember that wording and I thought that was
There was a
strange.
whole bunch of stuff that they wanted to do, and then when they were done with whatever was on their list, then the community could come in and do the rest.
Design process.
yeah. It was, I think in their letter, they mentioned community build and community volunteers, but in the process, it wasn't mentioned, so it's just a clarification of that
Oh,
they
you're right,
do.
they did use the blended build.
Oh, they have crushed run sub-base. What is that? Oh, that's below the board in place. Never mind.
And
So,
the installation process is a blended build. It may take up to 2 months, with our contractor being 3 weeks depending on the contractor's schedule. So they do have a contractor.
so we just
So
need
it
to
sounds like a
clarify,
3-week process, but 2 months depending on.
we just need clarification that they can meet our community build standards.
And
right?
timeline.
And timeline.
Okay.
And that's been we've been pretty clear about that up front, so.
Mhm. Okay, those are the things that I have for that. Is there anything else somebody feels they'd like to add?
Not for O'Brien.
Okay, so for Ultiplay, if we can go there next,
Um,
we want to address the issue of a higher
Higher
structure,
climbing structure.
for climbing / hiding or hanging out.
Climbing / interactive play at a higher level.
Okay.
And more challenging slides.
Yeah.
Okay. And should I say specifically the twisty slide as has been mentioned in the community input?
Yes.
Okay.
But the notion that as much as the community is invested in being inclusive and universal design, we also want to include those kids who are specifically athletic and need the better challenge of a higher
Right.
structure.
Okay. That's great. Okay. And now for game time, what questions do we have? Or Bill, did you have anything else to add to Ultiplay?
No, that was it.
Okay.
That was great.
And what would we, in a perfect world, hope we would have answered and clarified with game time?
I don't think they mentioned landforms, or they were the one that said they were trying to dissuade us from using landforms, so I would suggest that,
That gets flushed out.
yeah, that maybe they give us some ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they're opposed to it, that they say that up front.
Mm-hmm.
And they've taken very open to the extreme. So there is very little in terms of side panel stuff
Yeah.
for kids to play with.
Like
Well,
sensory
there's-
stuff, right?
There's some stuff here and there, but I think that's what I was talking about with the long ramps. They just have a lot of long. It seemed like a lot longer ramps. So maybe it's due with the sloping and how far they're trying to get vertically because they have a grade.
Yeah, it's all a great thing.
I love what Mike does.
Yes.
Cool.
I think with all 3 of these, I think it'd be a good exercise to ask what their definition of inclusive is. I mean, I think with Game Time, I think I got a sense of what their philosophy is with inclusive play based on the equipment they recommended. And then I got kind of turned off because that one merry-go-round thing that they had wasn't for wheelchairs. So I'd like to know if we could maybe ask the same, what's kind of like a generic question of what's your definition of inclusive?
So if you go to Game Time's website, they have a lot about what their definition of inclusive play,
But I want to hear it from,
who we're specifically working with.
right.
Oh, and do they have a wheelchair swing? Because they had.
Yeah, no one
cha-
offered a wheelchair swing.
One of them
In
did
our
at
top.
least. Not in
Right.
our top.
Oh yeah, so they had these interesting half slide, half climbing things on their website.
So are we
They
kind
also
of
don't have-
set with the questions, you think?
I think so. So the two pan-specific ones that go to everybody, ask definition of inclusive, and for a wheelchair swing. Then for O'Brien, we would like to discuss their lack of ramps and set widths, have them address the community build and timeline, make sure they can.
It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to ask them all about the community build, you know, maybe to even just make all these questions just very generic. If they're even gonna be able to ask them.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, is when would we be able to ask these
Yeah,
questions?
I don't know.
Well, just, yeah, these two people that go into this next meeting can say, you know, here are our choices. We would love if we could address these things before we move forward, but I don't know that we'll be able to. So we just
Not
have to,
without
we have to keep
pushing
that
our
in the back
timeline.
of our head. Just because we want it doesn't mean we get it. But
So we have our three, we have questions, what else do we need?
I think we need to decide if it's gonna be you or I that goes with Elizabeth.
Elise.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Every time in my head, I'm like, which is it?
No,
And
it's
I just
okay.
do it
You are not
wrong.
the only person. It always happens, and there's various ways you can mangle my name, and I
Lisa.
heard most
Say it
Lisa.
one time for the record.
Just think Lisa with an E before it and a Beth afterwards. It's the best
Elise.
way.
So Elizabeth,
I get like Elizabeth a lot.
That's what I do.
Yeah, no.
all right.
No, it's okay. Just think Lisa and
Lisa.
then with an E.
For the two, I would say I would like you to go. I think you guys are closer to the focus group of what this needs to be, and you may be able to respond with a totally different perspective than I can bring to it. So I'd prefer to see you go,
Okay.
unless
happy
you
to
feel
do it.
uncomfortable.
No, I'm happy to do it. Okay.
Go team.
All right.
So.
Hopefully they can make that around our schedules.
Yeah.
He did mention in the email that we got today that there are worksheets for the RFP criteria. The thing that I did was just something that I did just to have something to work with, so it may be different than what I have. So I would suggest that, and there are printed copies, so I would suggest getting in touch with them and getting those as soon as possible, and then trying to stick to the evaluations that they set forth, right? Because they
So
seem,
because it's, yes, and I was thinking, because it's Elizabeth and I,
Good job.
we can send an email to Steve, Elizabeth, and I, and we can reply to all because there's no quorum.
Right, because there's two of us.
yeah, and what I learned about this, I didn't realize this, but we can send emails to everybody, but we can't reply all, right? So like, I can send an email to everybody saying, hey, this is what's gonna happen, or hey, this is the thing. But if we start corresponding back and forth and that becomes an open session thing, so
Is it an open session thing if it's us two and Steve?
no.
No,
No.
'cause
No,
we're
Okay.
not.
but I think if you guys if you have something that you wanna say, you can say it to the group. It's just that,
We
let
can't
it be known
respond
that
to
we
it.
can't respond
Right,
to it.
yeah,
So
I
like,
was just
I
thinking
could
for us
say
to
everything to the
schedule,
group,
yeah.
and you could say something to the group.
right.
But
Can
you
we
can't
say-
say it together.
Right, but can I? So I can't say that Danielle and I talked about this.
I don't think that would be good, no. I think that would be implying,
A psychic connection.
Jeez, this is confusing.
Yeah,
It is
no, okay.
confusing, and
I was just
it
thinking,
is.
because either you or I could email Steve after this. This is just follow-up for us. Steve, here us two, go ahead and reply all, because it's just us two, to get this meeting set up and to get us these worksheets.
And it really only applies to the committee's mandate and business. So if, say, I wasn't gonna come tonight, and I was gonna say, hit everybody and say, can somebody pick up my worksheets with my opinions? Because
Okay.
that would be something we could all reply all to, because it's not precisely,
Committee
So we
business,
can
that's
committee
personal
business.
business.
yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe the
Deliberations,
dishwasher
I
or not.
guess. I don't know. I just, let's keep it clean.
Yeah,
Um,
trying to.
So, sorry, quick thing. So the Alta Play, going back to it, you guys know that it only has, it doesn't have a zip line type thing. It has the one handle thing, just like we have in the park today, right?
Yes, it's not.
I didn't know
perfect.
that, but that is kind of an issue, because I envision having
Zip
the
line.
chair zip line.
Right. I thought that was a very cool.
I'm adding it to my.
I think whatever, I mean, maybe with the exception of the tall climber, but whatever activity we have for one kid, we should have for another kid. And if it's something cool like a zip line, we've got to have a seat.
Chair.
Especially because then little kids can do it too, because
Right,
you know they want to
Right.
participate.
Oh,
So.
definitely. That's one of the things that I like a lot about anywhere you have, you know, those chair things. It's like this works for you. You can you can put a little baby in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can I suggest that you guys reach out to Steve
Yep.
and set up the meeting dates and get the copies, and then once you have gone through everything, you may actually come up with other questions that you want to include. Would you mind
Sharing them with the
copying those
group.
with the group?
Okay, but if the two of us come up with other questions,
Whatever. I trust you guys. That's the whole point. You know, you guys are representing us. So
I'm just trying to figure out if the two of us come up with questions.
don't
I guess
You can send them back to us, we just can't comment on
right,
them.
but we can't have talked about the questions and send them saying Danielle and I have come up with these questions. Right.
I don't know.
Not true, because you've been appointed to go to this meeting with the DPW,
Okay.
and
Yeah, I mean-
therefore,
We're a delegation.
in order, yeah.
Not a
in-
quorum.
cool.
Yeah, and if there's other questions that come up that we haven't talked about, I mean, just
Okay.
include them. I mean, you have that leeway. Don't feel confined that you can't do your job because you
Yep.
feel like, you know, we can't meet about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's make
Okay.
this work.
All right.
Okay, so are we good with,
I think so.
So ironically, this is like the earliest we end, or are we not done?
we're not that early, it's 9:00. So to-dos we've done one recommendation of 3 potential vendors that we are going to also include. We have some other questions about, and maybe Steve and Gary and Nick can answer those questions, or maybe they can't, but.
Do you know if they've worked with these people before?
I think you and I are about to find out.
Well, I'm sure we are, but going into it, I'm wondering if Bill knows.
I've been in Steve's office once, and he had the landscape structures.
You know what? I think they did
Thing
one of the school
there.
playgrounds
Okay.
just because of seeing stickers and playing. I want to.
I'd be surprised if they haven't done work with them before,
Yeah.
so I don't
Okay.
know how.
So probably O'Brien and Sons, which is landscape
Yeah, but like I said, I've been in his office once, so,
Yeah.
and I've seen their brochure there, so,
Where is Steve?
Alpha
he-
Road.
Oh,
it's,
he's on Alpha Road?
yeah.
Oh,
So we've got 3 that we're gonna go with, and I want to stress that you guys have the flexibility of matching their suggestions. So I would say that if they come back with, well, we like X, and X is one of our X, Y, and Z, then we can say that we agree with you and we want to go forward with one recommendation.
Yes.
And if they don't like any of our top 3,
I don't think honestly that's going to be a problem.
If
I
you
hope
guys
not.
can't
I
find a
just want to know
consensus.
what we think at
Yes,
this
so
point.
it's a good question. So if you guys can't find consensus, then just, agree to disagree, and we'll take our recommendation of the 3 and give it to the town manager and let the decision kind of play out. Right? And we'll support why we chose those 3. But I'd be surprised if we don't find a common ground in one of those 3.
I think we will. I
Mhm.
have high hopes.
So we've got our 2 members, and then what'll happen if there's not a consensus, don't feel like we have to make a decision. We'll take that to the town manager if we need to. Great?
Yeah.
A quick demolition update for folks watching at home and for us. The demolition at the playground occurred last week, Tuesday through Friday. I believe the dumpsters are still there now, but I believe that the work's been done. The swing seats and I believe the chains have been, were removed on Monday prior to the Tuesday being demolition day. And as much information as I know about them is that they're going to another municipal entity. I don't know who that is. That's what it said. The benches and the picnic tables were salvaged, I believe. They were at least the benches that were sort of on post and concreted in the ground were pulled out and set aside. I think they were salvaged.
Those were in good shape though, right?
They were in okay shape, I guess. I don't know. I've asked these questions, but this is, I haven't gotten responses yet.
Yeah.
I will say that with the exception of the twist slide, all the plastic slides and tubes were trashed. They did make an effort to cut away the big slide in the back with a chainsaw, but they cut the top supports and didn't cut the bottom supports, and when the top supports fell, the thing split in 2. So that got put in the dumpster. When I left on Tuesday, the twist slide was standing by itself in the middle of the thing, and then when I came back the following day, it was gone. Steve he said the same thing. It was there in the morning, then he left for lunch, and when he came back, it was gone, but he didn't know what had happened to it.
Wait, Steve doesn't know what happened to it?
That was at least what came back to me.
People take things, all sorts of things,
but
so.
that's a pretty big take.
They
without
needed-
a plan.
What had been communicated to him was that Nick said that was going to go to a nonprofit in town. So, I don't know. It could have, he couldn't, I asked specifically if it was in inventory or if it was in storage or somewhere, and I was just told that it was gonna go to a nonprofit, but it could have ended up in a dumpster. He couldn't say either way. They tried to move the playground entry, and then that split in half. They passed along the front sign and the donation plaque to, or at least we let Kevin Reddy know and put those 2 together. So,
So are those with the DPW right now?
I guess, yeah, but Kevin at least knows. I talked to his sister by messenger, and they were gonna touch base with Steve to try to get those together on that. And from that same post I posted on Facebook about it, there were a number of people that were really excited about the potential of maybe rebuilding it, in a different location or sort of whatever. So it's, it's maybe the old one's gone, but there's an opportunity for new ones, and people
I
seem
was
excited
kind of
about it.
hoping that
People seem
maybe that
excited
would
about it.
be
Yeah.
something.
And maybe that's not necessarily the entryway, maybe it's the middle section or
Right.
something. So it's, it's not,
So we can continue to maybe include it in the branding discussion.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it should. Tree protection. The critical root zones were marked with paint. 2 were marked with wooden stakes around the root zone area. A snow fence was put around the front, I think it was the second tree, I think that was 8, around half of that tree. And then on Monday, on Tuesday, when we were filming, it was like, the guy in the big truck thing was amazing. He navigated in and out and around and moved and drug the dumpster around to get it close. It was just an amazing process to watch because there were.
I wish I'd been able to see it. So you have video?
We have video, yeah.
'Cause I want to see that.
It's really is a pretty amazing process to watch. He was really a gifted operator of that big
The
piece of machinery.
surgeons of the.
No wasted movements, just like on it. But then, on Wednesday and Thursday, Jim will show you some pictures. Jim sent some pictures to me and to the town manager about some of the work that was done inside the critical root zones of the trees. So, with that,
You win some, you lose some. Huh?
yeah, and I think from the demolition perspective, there were beams and stuff that were in the ground that they used the heavy machinery to pull out, and Jim can talk about this more specifically because I didn't see this being done. And then there was some scraping and stuff that was done to get some of the wood fiber off the top that impacted the root zones as well. So, the tree protection guidelines that we outlined, that the previous committee said this is what it should be, that everybody sat in this room and talked about and finally agreed upon after hours of deliberations, weren't followed. There weren't snow fences put up. There were reasons given why they weren't, because it would have impeded the work, and that's a reasonable statement. I understand that, but unfortunately, we're looking at the possibility of some damage that was done, and hopefully we can address those critical root zones and tree protection guidelines before the construction starts, so that if they are too restrictive, that we can find a happy medium so that we can protect them as much as we can and possibly not come up against something like we're going to look at now. One really quick thing that I want to say before Jim talks about these is that Steve did mention to me last week that he was supposed to have a second opinion from an arborist
Yeah.
by Thursday. And that arborist was doing his analysis while the demolition was going on, so I don't know if that changed or not, but we haven't received anything. And then in the email today, he mentioned that the report should be back before the next meeting, but I don't know what next meeting he was referring to, so.
I'm surprised it's taken that long to get an
Yeah,
answer,
I
cause
don't
like if
know.
you get someone to come out and look at your trees, they don't usually.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just relaying what was relayed to me.
No, I know, I'm wondering, well,
So, Jim, Martin,
Okay.
if you'd like to sort of point out on the camera what on the
Yeah,
on the
here's
screen.
the first one, and of course, this is why I like chain link fences. The standard also called for metal stakes. Didn't use wood. I don't know if they had problems driving it into the ground because of the frost, or they just didn't want to try. And then they gave up. Somebody did mark out the critical root zone with paint on the ground, and that was fine. But then they went in after the timbers, which in my opinion, they could have left there and they didn't have to be removed. They were in good shape actually for 30-year-old timbers too. But anyways, they had to go in and they used the big equipment, and where a couple of guys could have probably just lifted them straight up, they,
scoop them out.
yeah.
Well, they probably had to remove them for, if we're doing pour it in place, I assume particularly since at least one of the designs cut through between trees, so I don't think they'd be
Yeah,
able to.
well, I guess I look at it, why not let the designer make that call rather than the bulldozer operator? Okay, 3 trees I think were damaged. How much, I don't know. That's the tricky thing with trees, is you don't know, sometimes probably 5 years or so.
So which trees, cause I can't
They
tell from
got the sugar
pictures.
maple, which was tree 8.
Sorry, can you give locations, like, if you're looking at the park, if you're looking at the park from the north-south orientation, or if you're looking at.
Enough maps.
Oh, look.
7 is the apple tree, isn't that right?
Okay, the apple tree is fine.
So 7's the
That's
apple
big
tree.
apple tree out the front.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
oh, good.
The
Yeah.
apple tree, that one, the sugar maple next to it
Yeah,
got nailed.
okay.
The Bradford pear got nailed.
Oh, so the two
And the
front,
little leaf linden. And I'm glad the lady that planted it wasn't here. That
Yeah.
got nailed.
so the
that
three
one
they
got
didn't
real
really
bad.
wanna keep.
She did those.
That's the one,
With the exception of the apple tree.
Yeah.
that's the one the Girl Scout
All the
troop,
ones I thought they might get, I
Planted, right?
figured for sure.
That's the 4th
Yeah.
one back.
okay.
So it's
Anyways,
Okay.
So 8, 9, and 10.
yeah. And,
That's really
the
disappointing.
Bradford, again, they got in here. Here's their critical root zone. This mark right here. By the way, the orange, oh, okay, they show up as, well, they're supposed to be orange. these were marks on the ground that they made. This was their critical root zone. And then, of course, they violated their own critical root zone.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure one person made the zone and the other person was,
But anyways, this gives you some idea of how much damage was done. Here's where they were supposed to stay out of, and here they're into it. Bradford. This is the Little League.
sorry, I
League.
think that's a TV, you might not wanna,
Oh, yeah,
Smack it.
sorry. Anyways, what I did here is I took the trunk diameter and I just put it down, I made the mark, I put it down again, and you can see how close they were getting to the trunk. You know, we were recommending 6, they got it into 2.
right,
And this is a good sized root right here, that's probably about like that. So they really did some damage on that one. Here's the sugar maple at the end, and in this case, they piled old timbers in, again, inside the critical root zone, and I'm not sure what they did afterwards as far as getting it out. Again, I can't see them sending a couple guys in to pick them up and lift them out. I have a feeling they used equipment, but, so that's it. And like I said, I can't tell you, I know damage was done, I just can't tell you how bad it is.
oh, that's horribly disappointing.
Maybe that's something we can address with Paul and Steve and Gary when we're in this meeting, because we have guidelines, but whose job is it to enforce them? It's not our job, it's somebody else's job, and to try to say, you know, before the next phase starts,
If I could
identify said person.
comment on that. On the library, they ran into the same thing. The designer put in a critical root zone of the same one that we're using. They didn't enforce it at all. You know, so who's looking out for the taxpayer, I wonder?
I'm just curious, who's they to enforce? Is it DPW's job?
Okay,
Is
well-
it Cohen's job as the town?
Well, I
You
looked
know,
at,
manager,
on
I
the
don't
request for proposal for the library, and they had Gary Persichetti
Okay,
as the main, I don't know, clerk of the works, main supervisor or whatever.
yeah,
And I was led to believe that he was there,
okay.
but did not enforce, because I brought the critical root zone up to the library committee, and they had their minion go and talk to, I said, hey, you got a problem here.
Yeah,
And evidently Gary, he didn't get the message, or he didn't care, I don't know. But it's right on the plans.
Yeah, the question is whether, I don't know the structure of who's supposed to doing what overseeing over what period of time. So I know I went down there one morning after we got the original email about whether or not we were gonna be able to see the bids, and I had assumed I'd get a chance to speak to Steve, and he wasn't there, so it was guys who were working, so I don't know if things weren't clearly communicated to people.
in the end, somebody's the boss.
Right.
So I just wanna know, we can ask maybe in our meeting, who's the boss? And as the boss, what are you going to do to enforce the rules, that everybody has
And-
agreed to?
Well, there's
And
another thing.
compensate for the loss of
Sorry.
With
mature
government
trees.
work,
It's
there's
closer.
a final inspection, in which they're supposed to go through and make sure that everything has been accomplished. Who did the final inspection?
Well, the other question is, if they had the arborist go through before they did this to the trees, or whether they had the arborist go through after they did this to the trees.
During, I think, I saw the arborist and Steve meeting on Tuesday, and I'm assuming that he went back out again, so I'm guessing the first time the arborist saw it, there was already construction going on. You know, I mean, from my personal perspective, I think the biggest obstacle we face is just buy-in on these guidelines. You know, we fought them, frankly, in a public forum to try to get the guidelines established, even though we'd all agreed on them early on in the process.
The committee agreed on them, however, the person that, or people that needed to be bound by those decisions.
But we adjusted the tree protection guidelines from a chain link fence to a snow fence with
Right.
input from Steve. So, I mean, there was negotiation there going on.
He sat there during,
But then he later commented that this was overkill, 12 times the diameter is overkill.
well, he always thought it was overkill, and I think he
But he-
expressed that the whole time, but I think he was willing to go
He
with
never
it.
got up and said, well, okay, 5 is enough. And then, of course, the question has to be, well, how do you know and what are your references?
So I guess assuming that these trees aren't cut down in between now and the time that the installation starts, we should try to get agreement that we're gonna, if those guidelines don't make sense, if they are overkill, then let's come up with a set of guidelines that does make sense. And, you
It
know, those
comes-
guidelines would include who's responsible for making sure stuff is done right and you know,
I
whatever
think
those
it comes
protections
back
are.
to the, is there, what is the town's view of there being an advisory committee? What is the town's view of whether we've, you know, if we are hashing things out for hours and hours and we come to an agreement, is there,
Is it binding?
does it mean anything in terms of what's actually gonna happen? Because otherwise, we're wasting time.
I mean, I see it from their perspective in that it's not as black and white, because this was a tight workspace to have to maneuver around, and
Right.
you know, I get that.
I just,
But at the same time, I think that there could have been more collaborative work done and better planning done. I'll say that, better planning done ahead of time that could have eliminated some of these issues that we're seeing with these tree zones. And specifically, one of the things that kind of irks me is that the slides and the tubes, although they were said they were going to be recycled into other areas of town, they got trashed because there wasn't good planning done to save the big slide. And it
because
could have
I
been.
agree that there,
We had
I have
volunteers.
no idea what planning was done. I can say that we all were under the impression they were gonna save the entryway, and if you're gonna save a structure like that, I would imagine that if you've actually think that you're gonna save a structure like that, you need to get a structural engineer or someone in to plan how you are going to shore it up before you take it out. Unless you've gone out there and determined it's just absolutely impossible, but then I would have thought we would have heard about it beforehand. But I was just surprised that there didn't seem to have been any plan to, well, they're gonna shore it up, they're gonna rig it up like this to pull it out.
I was surprised that the plastic stuff wasn't disassembled. That was the impression that I had.
Yeah, that, it was
that
just
going to be
sawzalled.
unbolted and stored somewhere.
The problem with this is when, looking at this as an attorney, you have to say, who is the damaged party? Well, the damaged party is the town. If the town doesn't care about their own loss, then,
There's no grounds for a lawsuit.
right, then we don't have any standing to say, well, the trees and the slides were worth X amount of money, and
But I think
The project should have it back.
people, though, I mean, because there were people that were saying at town meeting, we want to make sure that that these slides and things are kept out of landfills, right? And so we tried to do our due diligence to make sure that those things were going to happen, and they didn't. So I think that maybe if the town officials aren't concerned with it, at least the town
people.
people were.
Yeah, I guess
And-
that comes to the fine line of, also, do we as an advisory board represent the town? We represent, I assume, given our attempts to get public's input, the voice of the customer effectively, which is the town for the town.
It's the people, we
It's
represent
the
the
people
Yeah,
for the town, so the town administration versus the town people, I assume the town administration is representing the town people, but yeah, it's kind of a quagmire.
And I have to say, everyone who spoke to us on that last play date all mentioned the trees.
Yeah.
They're gonna save the trees,
Right,
aren't
make sure
they?
there's the trees.
Every single one. So, they may be hearing from a lot of parents.
well, and I would, if anybody's watching or if you speak with anybody, I would encourage people to reach out directly to and not to bitch and moan, but
No.
to share your feelings with the town manager, because he wants to hear them, and I think that hearing from individuals will make a big difference. And the same thing with the board. I hope that I've not communicated in any way to you guys that I have some sort of stranglehold on communications with people. You should, if you have a concern or an idea or a comment or anything, you should not hesitate to reach out to anyone, right? Don't feel like you have to work around me, because that's not my intention at all. And if I've communicated that in any way, I apologize, so that's not what I want to have. We need to be a full, vibrant body of 5 individual people and all sort of share our thoughts and ideas with everyone that we're working with.
I didn't know if
Right.
there was officially a way that committees had to go through a chair, if they had a chair, so I appreciate you saying something. I think we sorted this out last week too. But
Okay.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
I had assumed that there may be, if there's a chair, that that's the person who has to represent the group.
Actually, there was another picture. Oh, here it is, right over here. This is looking at, there was a big oak over here, and there were 15 trees that were cut down by the DPW, as I recall, when you requested the bittersweet be removed. The boys are just out of control.
You know, it's hard because we have these meetings and we have had DPW representation in the past. We haven't had it recently. There are things that are going to go on with destruction, with leveling, demolition, and with construction that none of us, you know, are there on the ground generally the whole time frame. I know you were there for a period of it. So I want to give a benefit of the doubt that there are some things that we are missing, but I do generally feel like we're not, like we're in a isolated debating bubble that isn't
We're not respected.
getting.
I think putting a positive spin on it, I think we could all improve. I think the process would certainly be improved by better communication and more collaborative work.
I really, and that's the thing, I think I'll speak for myself, I really want to work collaboratively, like active communication, proactive communication on all parts. That's I know what I want to do, and I think that's what the rest of us all want to.
And in speaking with the town manager by email and on the phone, he values this project and sees it as like a major project for next year. So everybody wants this to be successful. So
Right.
to me, you know, more collaboration, better communication would only make this process work that much better, you know. And come time for the community build, we're gonna have to be firing it all in, you know, we're gonna have to have our ducks in a row. And if we don't get all this stuff, expectations set and communication set up front, it's gonna be difficult, so, anyway. Any more comments on the trees? Follow-up items, I just, at the last meeting, David and Amanda actually left, but he had identified some issues with the property boundaries, so I just wanted to let everybody know that I did follow up with Steve about that and ask him to specifically touch base with them about their concerns. And he said that he would. I didn't get a chance to ask them before they left if he
Has the
had.
survey been done?
The last I spoke with Steve, which was the week before the demolition, the actual survey, on-site survey had been done, but they were still, I guess, putting the information into a map, or he said it some way that I can't remember what I said, but it was,
GIS or GPS?
no, they were having to do the paperwork, I guess, so that was the last time that I discussed that with him.
Well, the paperwork means registering it.
No, I think they just have to identify that property line. The problem is I pulled the deed for the property, and the property lines are real fudgy.
Yeah,
I used to do some surveying,
Yeah.
you know, I'm curious, but I look at it and I'm going, I think there's something wrong there, and it should be addressed before you start building.
I hear that's common in New England.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I remember reading that when we were at our house.
Yeah, it's.
Our old house. Oh, and our new one.
the other thing we kind of touched on before was that the second opinion of the arborist report was being done. He said back on that it should have been available last Friday, but the email that came out today said something about the next meeting, and I'm not sure what that meeting was. And then just a correspondence that I have with the town manager, just to sort of alleviate some concerns that you guys might have, was that he said specifically, this is his quote, "The trees will not be taken down upon the receipt of the report." So my understanding of that is that we're gonna have to review the information first before anything is done. So,
My concern is now that they will use the fact that, well, we've damaged the trees, now we have to take them down. Which actually is not really true, but it gives them a fig leaf.
Right, well, particularly if they go, well, your arborist says that if you've damaged it, they're gonna die eventually
Oh, yeah,
anyway.
you know, there's black,
then-
white, and then there's a big area in gray.
Right, right. No, and that's my concern too about when the arborist did go out, whether they went out and saw what the trees circumstance was, or whether they saw what the trees plus demolition circumstance.
Well, they did the same thing at the library, and they brought the arborist in, and they said, here's this gorgeous black walnut right here, and we're gonna put a parking lot right next to it. Well, the only thing the arborist could say is, yeah, you gotta take the tree down because it's not gonna survive. So sometimes it's the way the question is phrased going in determines the answer that you want. And very often the governments will do this. They'll get an opinion, but
Well, hopefully, given that there's no actual design yet, they're just asking about the health, hopefully.
I have no idea, and if the trees have to get taken down because of real design issues, I have no problem with that. My problem is when Steve wants to cut 3 of them down, well, why?
Because.
Steve likes to cut trees down.
Because it makes life easier.
Yeah, he doesn't see any value in them. I don't think the town sees any value in these trees.
yeah, we don't know.
I think that's
Let's
kind
not-
of an
let's not cast
overstatement.
aspersions. We don't
I
know. We don't know
anyways.
let's not judge. We don't know for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not here. Any other comments about, I would foresee that if the second arborist report comes back somewhat confrontational, that we would have the opportunity to ask for a third if we wanted to do that route. But let's cross that bridge when we get to it. A quick update, the survey, we touched on this last week, the playground equipment and design survey is done. 563 total responses, which I think is great. Anybody watching at home can access this presentation, and the links to the survey results are available at that Can Be Found Here link. Just some key findings. Half the respondents plan to use the playground weekly, so it's really going to get good use. Most of the respondents said that they're going to bring older kids to the playground.
Well, they're not by a huge.
Well, 70% it was older
Right,
kids.
but that doesn't mean that 70%, it wasn't an either or, right? It's not that, that doesn't mean that only 30% are bringing younger kids, because some of them are bringing multiples.
Yeah, I guess my take on that is just that it's going to be, there's need for both, right? There's need for, the three groups, the under, what's the, under 2, I think it was? Was it 2 to 5? Is that what
I
the?
think the only things listed were 2 to 5 and 6 to 12.
But there'll be a lot of older kids there as well. There was definitely a lot of strong support for inclusive, accessible, and sensory-rich components to the playground. And we had some good feedback and good data on the types of things that people wanted to see. So my take is that we should take this survey, and this will be part of the stuff that we give over to the new vendor we hire. Any questions or comments? Fundraising update, the Friends of Roberts Field had a reorganization meeting on December 13th. We elected a board of directors. We're working on our bylaws, articles of organization, our RS form, and then we'll have a bank account. The gift break campaign has pretty much been put on hold until the bank account is created. And so we have to finish the bylaws and the articles to do that, to get the bank account. So it's,
Oh, okay.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, by the way, I took pictures of I made a record of all the bricks
The current
that were
bricks.
there.
Oh,
Oh.
fantastic.
And your bricks are not gonna match theirs.
Well, not perfectly, but
Yeah.
the whole idea is to get similar
Yeah,
and.
but these were impressed,
Mm-hmm.
and yours are gonna be lasered, so
Mm-hmm.
you'll still be able to tell the new from the old, even though
Yep.
That's okay.
I did speak with a potential, just a vendor to get a cost estimate for that
okay.
150-foot stretch from the upper parking lot to the playground, and it's gonna be about, roughly materials and labor, around $18,000.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
About $12,000 for labor and base and stuff, and the other part is the actual bricks themselves. Which is great news, because I know we had talked about a $45 profit roughly on the two sizes we were talking about. And if we sell 1,000 bricks, that's, 50 grand. So if it's 18,000, then we should have enough to potentially build inside. So maybe some of the pathways that we're talking about with these vendors aren't poured in place forever if they're not within the fall zone, but maybe they're the actual bricks. So maybe we can actually, have the engraved bricks moving into the playground and sort of tie all that stuff together, which I think is pretty cool.
Absolutely.
And I think the 18 grand it's a lot, but it's a good number, because if we can, raise 50, then we can
Yeah, I think that's very doable.
stretch it out. So, good stuff there. And I got a commitment for 3 big bricks already too, so.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
Is that
So people are
companies
excited.
or people?
A person with a company. So, yeah, so it's a little bit of both. But that just shows that people are really excited about it, so it's
Yeah.
good
The
stuff.
more people I talk to, the better they felt about, like, the
They raised
overwhelming of, oh, those price
$100,000
points are
with
good,
the, with the brick campaign.
Second?
Who did?
20-something years ago, they raised 100,000 with the brick campaign.
For
For this
friendship.
one?
The guy I talked to said that they had some sort of a gift brick company in Concord, Massachusetts, which I hadn't heard of. I'm not saying we have to investigate them,
Yeah.
but they were there. And he was saying from his experience, he's had programs where they've sold hundreds of bricks, and they've had programs where they've sold thousands of bricks.
Really?
So he didn't think that our goal of 1,000 to 2,000 bricks was really that.
Oh, good. It
out of
seems like a
line.
lot to me, but I gather I've never done this before.
Yeah, it's a lot of, it's 13 pallets of bricks. It's a lot of bricks, but.
I mean, I can Google again and just check with that company, since I'm on hold anyway, I can't
Do
sign
anything.
contracts and go forward, so might as well just talk to them too.
Inclusive.
Just because they didn't show
Local.
up in my
Right.
top 5 on Google, there's a lot of things for that.
So that's at least good stuff, I think. The grants, Stephanie Lanzillo was going to contact you about, or you were going to contact her, I don't know who that was.
I was gonna contact her, and then I started feeling lousy, so.
If you could follow up with her, she has some experience with grant writing. She works for Rodenbush, and she seems to have a lot of knowledge for it, and I think we can get stuff kind of ramped up going there.
Yeah.
Corporate sponsorships, I was hoping Marcus to be here to update us there. And then the branding development, we met with a graphic designer who is working on logos for the playground for Friendship Park, for Roberts Field, and then for the natural areas, and then the athletic fields. And then he's also worked out some comp designs for two 3x8 signs in the grassy area between the upper and lower parking lot to say, this is coming soon, going to open in summer. And then also selling bricks and asking for volunteers. And then a third up by the playground with the final design, and then just more information so when people want to learn about it. And we got approval for those, for placement of those from the building inspector, so we're good to go on that.
Nice. That's awesome. About the grants and corporate sponsorships, I know there was some talk during the 4th meeting, Friends of Roberts Field, about sooner rather than waiting until February or whatever for the grants and
Yes.
stuff, and the corporate sponsorships, so.
I think all these things we kind of want to start trying to push as much as we can, and I feel like I'm kind of a bottleneck in the thing with the bylaws and the articles, but I've been trying to get people to give me their feedback.
You got a lot going on.
Nobody wants to help me. No, not help me. Nobody wants to comment, I should
It's
say.
been a very busy couple of
Yeah,
weeks.
it's
So-
been crazy.
You know what? Bylaws are not something that people really need to comment on. You just lift some,
Just rip the Band-Aid.
He
Yeah.
has multiple, I think at this point.
We have a scaled
we have
down
a
version,
huge
and
version
then like
and
a
a
giant
little-
version, and so I think it's kind of scared people off. But I also got feedback from our treasurer that he has a person that he's worked with in the past to develop the 1023 form and the bylaws, and
Oh,
they're
awesome.
willing to look it over.
Oh, that's great.
So,
Because I got a name of someone I might be able to contact who used to work with someone else, but that's kind of the farthest I got.
and I have written bylaws.
okay, well, so
Before.
this is it's really the 1023 form that scares me.
Yeah,
So, once that gets moving,
Okay.
it'll loosen up.
That one I didn't do, so.
Any other comments on questions?
The branding, what's the, next step on the branding?
So we had a meeting, at the library on Saturday with a few people, both from this board and the Friends of Roberts Field, and then also, some other people. I just basically invited anyone who wanted to come and talk or listen. And, so we kind of shared thoughts with John there. John's the graphic designer, and, he made some revisions, sent them back, and then I sent them back out for comments, and I haven't heard anything back. So, there's,
So you're
It
just
was
looking.
Christmas weekend, though.
Right.
yeah, so
It's been a very busy week, so
Right.
you're looking for,
feedback from
feedback
folks
on
and
the
then,
bylaws
to
and on the
give to him,
branding.
right?
okay.
Like
You
for-
might wanna send out one, like, okay, Christmas is over.
Okay.
What did you, you may have missed this email last week, cause it's been crazy.
Really I mean, like the logo for the playground had things like the entryway
Entryway.
in it, right?
Right.
So that, when it got destroyed, it was like, well, but if we're gonna include that in part of the design moving forward, then that makes sense to have it included in the logo.
Well, if we do have people who are interested in building another one, I think it'd be great, and as an homage to the past, even if not,
In memoriam.
in memoriam.
Gone but not forgotten.
And I do know one of the senior scout leaders, and I can see if there's anyone still looking for an Eagle Scout project.
Okay, I think there's a lot of opportunities for that. So what I'll do is, I'll send out a follow-up email with the, PDF that had the concepts that he had in it. Really, the most pressing thing, I think, for that is the signs, the 2 signs on the bottom, to get those out so people know what's happening.
Yes.
And then, if the logo changes after that thing's printed, it's not that big a deal. But I'll send that out this week.
Thanks.
And if anybody listening at home wants to be involved in that, this is just, just send me an email at info@robertsfield.org, and I will add you to the list for that feedback for that. Just a quick update, our committee email list bumped up to it's actually 330 names, email addresses now. We have 551 members at the Roberts Field Facebook group. Thank you.
Lots of friends.
Yeah, it's good. Danielle, you've done a great job with as an admin there and keeping the content fresh and liking and commenting and
Trying.
stuff. So you're doing a great job. Thank you for doing that.
I'm sorry,
Um,
it's a public page, right?
Yeah.
I should,
It's public, but you have to be a member to comment. So anybody can read it, but to comment on it, you have to be a member.
right, you have to be on Facebook to actually make a comment.
You
So-
have to actually be on Facebook, and you have to be a member of the Friends of Roberts Field to comment.
Okay. But I should be able to see it. I haven't even bothered to go to it,
Yes,
since I
it's-
am not on Facebook.
Yes.
So.
So if you're not on Facebook, it's not for you.
Well, no, I mean, if
I mean,
it's a
it's
public
for-
page, I will be able to get info, I will be able to read what people have commented on.
You should be able to.
Even without being
Yes.
on Facebook.
If it's a public page, that's the difference between, like, because a lot of companies have Facebook pages that they are public that I can see, even though I'm not on Facebook.
Okay, I didn't
Um,
know that.
But, like, if it's a private page, you
Okay.
just get you get
It's
no
like if you
information.
Google Friends of Roberts Field Facebook, you'll see it. You just can't.
We'll
do
just
anything.
do that right now. Yes.
Oh, it's okay. You don't have to. I believe you. I
No,
just didn't-
I know,
didn't
but
know
this
that.
way I'll
That
remember
was
to
like
look
a
at it
little
later.
blow my mind. Probably the last person in the world to know that thing.
And then I think as of the last Friends of Roberts Field meeting, we had 16 completed forms for actual physical members of the group. So just to kind of let you guys know where we are with that.
There are a couple of people who redid forms at the last play day that said that they've been contacting, and they haven't been contacted back. That they'd already submitted membership or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And someone from the other, was it Heather
Or
or
Stephanie, I
someone,
think.
or Stephanie said that she'd.
She
tried
had
it.
problems
So
with the
maybe-
online thing. Yeah, she did say that. Okay, well, and I think moving forward, one of the things that we need to do is, I need help with
Yeah.
structuring it so that it's a easy flow, right? Because I think right now it's, like, the robertsfield.org website is just sort of the data and all the stuff and the meeting stuff, and it's just kind of been a clearinghouse for it. And the Friends of Roberts Field is kind of more specific to that, but we need to make it flow better. So
Okay,
we'll cover that in a future meeting.
okay.
Any questions about this?
No.
So our next meeting date, so just in terms of next steps, we're gonna need to, on January 8th, the town will, select their vendor, so we'll need to have a vendor meeting. We'll need to schedule, start talking about public input and possibly school sessions, and then, finalize the playground design by February, early February if we can. So I would suggest that we try to pick 2 dates in January, to accomplish this. And the reason why it's separated out, why the Tuesdays are last, is that those were, we have a,
Non-video.
for telemedia, yeah,
Not
Tuesdays are
ideal.
tough for them, so if we could make any of the first 4 work.
I am returning the 16th, and I will not be up for
The
the
17th.
17th, so.
So,
I can't do the 17th.
I'm out of town the week of the 22nd, and next week would be rough for me.
On the 3rd.
The 3rd would be difficult, childcare wise.
I could do, I know it's tough for telemedia, I could do the 9th.
Yeah, I can do the 9th and I can do the 31st.
I can do both of those.
Adele?
I could do the 31st, I could not do the 9th. But, go ahead.
So, I mean, the 31st seems really late.
Yeah, the 9th would be good because we'll have the, but I mean, we're not gonna be able to, I don't think we'll be able to have our vendor meeting on the 9th. Maybe we could, I mean, maybe if if it's done ahead of time, if we can work out with the DPW to say we wanna have this first meeting with the new vendor to work on the design the day after the Board of Selectmen approve it.
So how does the Board of Selectmen approval work? They just, I mean, the question is, would we know by the day of before the 9th? Or would it be determined,
We should know the Wednesday prior to the 8th.
okay,
Because that's what's gonna go in the packet. So the recommendation will be in the packet, the Board of Selectmen's packet the week prior. So,
okay, and they will, but I guess that's the question. The Board of Selectmen is just stamping whatever has been presented.
I mean, there'll be discussion. I can't, you know, I don't,
They have
I
to vote.
I literally don't know how it works.
yeah, I don't think they'll, I mean, I wouldn't wanna characterize it as a rubber stamp, but I think at that point, I think that everybody's kinda done their due diligence and they'll go with what.
Right, I
recommended.
literally just didn't know whether there would be discussion there in terms, because the 9th would be, I would feel better about getting it earlier in the month, but, I just don't know.
Well, we can't do the 17th, right? You guys
Okay.
can't do the 17th,
can't.
and you can't do the 22nd, so really the 9th is our only,
So we could schedule the 9th, and if we don't,
I mean,
and
unless,
it doesn't look, if it doesn't look like there will be a way to get the vendor, then you'll know more than 48 hours ahead of time.
I didn't include the 11th. I don't know why I didn't.
The 11th is when we're meeting with Fourth, I think.
No, that was last. Well, we can change that one if we need to.
No, the 11th that is our next Fourth meeting.
We can change that if we,
We can meet.
it's more
Oh,
pressing that we meet with the vendor. than-
Right, so I guess the question is, I think the 9th and the 11th were options that you'd given that group.
Well, does the 11th work for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I expected to be here for the other meeting.
Mhm.
Adele, does the 11th work for you?
No, I'm out of town.
For the 9th, you were also out of town.
I am out of town from the 9th through the 16th.
So how about this? I will, can we tentatively say the 9th or the 11th? And I will email Steve, I guess, and ask if we can have our first vendor meeting on either one of those days, and if one of those days works best. And if we can't have our first vendor meeting that day, do we still want to meet?
I think we should leave it on our schedules and maybe decide as we get closer,
Okay,
if that's okay. It's easier to block it off than if I give that time away to get it back. It's always nice to say, oh, I have a free night tonight, my thing got canceled, but
Right.
it's hard to say, I need to go somewhere at the last minute.
all right, so January 9th or the 11th,
Uh,
and then the 31st is the next day that works for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I've been sick and with sick kids, I didn't have the meetings from last meeting to bring to this one, so I'll just have them both. And, we'll have them for the 11th, for the 9th or the 11th. So, my apologies.
Sorry, just a quick question. The 25th isn't available, right? You didn't have that one on there.
The
Oh,
20th.
that's a Thursday. I guess you don't do Thursdays.
No, we can. We just can't do Fridays, but there was a finance committee in this room, but I can, I mean, if we want, I can, I don't,
No, that's fine. I was just trying to. 9th or the 11th is good. It's earlier in the month if we can get something going sooner. As long as you're okay with it not being.
Yeah.
Hopefully Marcus will be.
all right, so I have the 9th or the 11th and then the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
Good?
Here,
And then that's just, nothing's changed here. This is still the thing we're moving towards. I did, just a quick thing I forgot to add in this. I did speak with, you know, we've gotten like 40 some odd entries for the My Dream Playground thing. So I reached out to the library to see if they could find space to display them somewhere, and she was gonna talk to her volunteers and her crew to see if they could find a place
Cool.
to put it up. And they've been great. They actually made a sign for us with the blanks and with a thing of crayons that really helped a lot. So that would be great. So just let you know where that's kind of going.
That's cool.
All right?
You could, well, that might be a much. I was gonna say you could turn them into a sign to put up on at the sign in the playground, but that might be a bit too much.
Yeah, I have to scan them. That's one of the things I have to do too, is to scan them and post them on the website as well so people can see them. But I haven't gotten to that yet, but that's on my list. Okay.
Would you entertain a motion to adjourn?
I would definitely entertain a motion to adjourn.
Right.
Is there a second?
I second.
Second.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.